Miranda Hayes stared at the security monitor, her blood running cold. There he was again, the night janitor with the kind eyes and the worn work boots, emerging from her private server room at 2:47 a.m. Evan Cole had no clearance for that floor, no reason to be near the code that would make or break Nexus Technologies' billion-dollar launch. As CEO, she'd already buried one company after her ex-husband's betrayal. She wouldn't bury another. Tonight she'd follow him herself and find out exactly what he was stealing and who he was selling it to. If you're hooked, smash that like button and drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this story travels. Now, let's dive in. Miranda Hayes didn't sleep anymore. Not really. She existed in that gray space between consciousness and collapse, fueled by espresso that tasted like burnt ambition and the knowledge that one wrong move would destroy everything she'd spent 3 years rebuilding. At 38, she'd earned every silver strand threading through her dark hair, every sharp edge in her voice that made junior executives flinch during quarterly reviews. Some called her ruthless. She preferred careful, because careful people didn't lose everything twice. The rain drummed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of her downtown penthouse office, 18 stories above Seattle's restless streets. It was nearly midnight on a Thursday, and she was exactly where she'd been every night this week, hunched over her laptop, reviewing security footage with the intensity of a prosecutor studying crime scene photos. The Nexus Technologies logo glowed on her screen, that sleek, interconnected design that promised innovation, efficiency, disruption. Everything her company supposedly stood for. Everything that could evaporate in 72 hours if this launch failed. Her 7-year-old daughter, Sophie, was asleep at Miranda's mother's house across town, probably curled up with that ratty stuffed elephant she refused to let anyone wash. Miranda's chest tightened with the familiar guilt. Another bedtime story missed. Another promise to make it home for dinner, broken. Sophie understood, or at least she'd stopped asking when Mommy would be home for real. That hurt worse than the complaints ever had. "You're doing this for her," Miranda whispered to her reflection in the rain-streaked glass. The woman who stared back looked hollowed out, all sharp cheekbones and darker circles. "Everything is for her." She returned her attention to the security monitors, scrolling through the timestamp queue that Harris, her head of security, had flagged earlier. There, 2:47 a.m. Tuesday, camera 14, executive floor. The footage showed a man in a gray work uniform pushing a janitorial cart past the elevator bank. Nothing unusual about that, except the cart never made it to the janitorial closet on the south end. Instead, it disappeared around the corner toward the restricted server room. Miranda's jaw clenched. She advanced the footage. 3 minutes later, the same man emerged, glanced both ways down the corridor, and continued toward the stairwell. Not the elevator. The stairwell. She pulled up Monday's footage. There. 1:15 a.m. Same man, same cart, same route. This time he spent 7 minutes inside an area that required biometric clearance he absolutely did not have. "Who the hell are you?" Miranda muttered. She zoomed in on the clearest frame. The man was maybe 40, with close-cropped dark hair starting to gray at the temples, a strong jawline shadowed with stubble, and an expression of intense focus as he pushed his cart. He moved with purpose, not the casual pace of someone simply doing their job. There was something almost military about his posture, the economy of his movements. Miranda pulled up the employee database and cross-referenced the janitorial staff roster. There weren't many options. Nexus contracted most of its cleaning services, but kept a small night crew on direct payroll for the sensitive floors. She found him in seconds. Evan Cole, age 41. Hired 8 months ago, clean background check. Prior employment, various maintenance and facilities positions across the Seattle area. No red flags, no college degree listed, no technical certifications. But he'd been inside her most secure server room 4 times in the last 2 weeks. Miranda's phone buzzed. A text from Harris. Found something else. Check Friday's footage, R&D wing, 11:47 p.m. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. The R&D wing housed the prototype hardware for the upcoming launch, the quantum processing units that would revolutionize data encryption for medical records, financial institutions, government agencies. It was the reason Nexus's stock price had tripled in anticipation. It was also the reason three rival companies would happily pay millions for advance access to those specifications. The footage loaded. There was Evan Cole again, this time carrying not a cart but a simple mop bucket. He walked directly to Laboratory 7, glanced at the camera. Did he know where they all were? And used a keycard that definitely wasn't his to slip inside. Miranda's blood turned to ice. She grabbed her phone and dialed Harris. He answered on the first ring, his voice thick with sleep. Boss? How did he get that keycard? I don't know yet. I'm running the access logs now, but Miranda, there's more. I pulled his personnel file, the detailed one. He's got a 7-year-old son, single parent. Wife died 4 years ago. I don't care about his personal situation. I care about what he's stealing and who he's selling it to. I know, but listen, his listed address? I drove by this afternoon. It's a decent apartment complex in Fremont. Nothing fancy, but it's not cheap. On a janitor's salary? With a kid? The math doesn't work. Miranda's mind raced through the implications. Extra income, secret income, the kind that came from corporate espionage. Do we have anything concrete, anything that would hold up legally? Not yet. But if you're thinking about bringing in law enforcement, I'm not. Miranda, if this leaks before the launch, even as an investigation, the board will panic. The investors will panic. We'll lose the momentum we've spent 3 years building. I need proof first. Real, undeniable proof. Harris was silent for a moment. What are you planning? Miranda stared at the frozen image of Evan Cole on her screen, this man who cleaned her office floors and apparently had access to her company's most valuable secrets. I'm going to follow him tonight. See where he goes, who he meets. Then I'll know what we're dealing with. That's a bad idea. Let me assign someone. No, this stays between us. If there's a mole inside Nexus, I can't risk tipping them off. I'll take my own car, keep my distance. Just track his location and send it to my phone. Miranda, if this guy is selling to competitors, he could be dangerous. You don't know what... I've dealt with dangerous men before. Her voice went flat, cold. My ex-husband taught me exactly how much damage someone close to you can do. This time, I'm getting ahead of it. She ended the call before Harris could argue further and grabbed her keys. The penthouse felt suffocating suddenly, all that expensive furniture and abstract art that was supposed to signal success. It just looked empty. She thought of Sophie sleeping soundly across town, trusting that her mother was building something secure for their future. That trust was the only thing Miranda had left that felt pure. She wasn't going to let anyone take it away. The Nexus Technologies building occupied an entire block of Seattle's tech corridor, all glass and steel and carefully cultivated greenery that suggested innovation growing wild. At 11:30 p.m., it looked like a glowing monument to productivity, lights still burning in half the windows despite the late hour. Miranda parked her black Mercedes SUV in the shadows across the street, far enough from the main entrance to avoid the reach of the security lights. She'd changed into dark jeans and a charcoal sweater, trading her usual executive armor for something that wouldn't catch attention. Her phone showed a tracking dot. Harris had pulled Evan Cole's real-time location from the building's security system. He was on the 4th floor, maintenance level. Miranda settled in to wait. 43 minutes later, a beat-up silver Honda Civic emerged from the employee parking garage. Even in the darkness, Miranda could see the dent in the rear quarter panel, the mismatched hubcap, the way the whole vehicle seemed to sag slightly to one side. Harris sent a quick text. That's him, heading east on Pine. Miranda waited until the Honda turned the corner, then pulled out to follow. The streets were slick with fresh rain, reflecting the neon and LED glow of the city's restless heart. She kept 3 cars between them, basic surveillance technique she'd learned from a private investigator during her divorce proceedings. Her ex-husband had taught her plenty about deception. She'd learned even more about detection. The Honda drove carefully, obeying speed limits, signaling every turn. Whatever else Evan Cole might be, he wasn't trying to shake a tail. That suggested either he was confident he wasn't being followed, or he had nothing to hide. Miranda didn't believe in the second option. Not anymore. They headed east through Capitol Hill, then north into the University District. The neighborhood changed gradually, less glass and steel, more brick and wood, the architecture aging as they moved away from the downtown core. Student apartments gave way to modest houses, then to areas where prosperity clearly hadn't reached. Streetlights grew more sporadic. The few pedestrians Miranda saw walked with the hunched urgency of people for whom the night held more threat than promise. The Honda's brake lights flared. It turned into a cracked parking lot beside a squat concrete building that had probably been beige once, but had faded to the color of old dishwater. A hand-painted sign above the entrance read, Northside Community Center, in letters that were half peeling, half hopeful. Miranda pulled to the curb a block away and killed her lights. Through her windshield, she watched Evan Cole climb out of his Honda. He was bigger than he'd looked on the security footage, maybe 6'2", with the broad shoulders of someone who'd done physical work most of his life. He reached into the back seat and pulled out 2 plastic storage containers, the kind people used for organizing garages or basements. Her breath caught. Those containers. She'd seen ones exactly like them in the server room storage closets, in R&D. In places Evan Cole had no authorization to access. He was stealing equipment, pulling it right out of her company, and he carried the containers toward the community center's entrance. A woman in a hijab and a worn winter coat held the door open for him, smiling like he'd just brought Christmas early. Evan said something that made her laugh, then disappeared inside. Miranda sat frozen in her car, mind racing. This wasn't a handoff with a corporate spy. This wasn't a meeting with a competitor's representative in some shadowy garage. This was, what? A community center? She pulled out her phone and searched for the Northside Community Center. The results were sparse. A barely functional website last updated 3 years ago, a few scattered mentions in local news articles about funding shortfalls and neighborhood revitalization efforts. Nothing that explained why a man with access to million-dollar technology would be here at midnight, unless the buyer was using the center as cover, unless the transaction was happening inside, away from cameras and witnesses. Miranda grabbed her phone and texted Harris. Northside Community Center, University District. Run a background check on this location. Any connections to tech companies or suspicious activity? His response came quickly. On it. What are you seeing? Not sure yet. Stand by. She climbed out of her Mercedes and locked it, hyper-aware of how out of place the luxury vehicle looked on this street. The rain had softened to a mist that clung to her face and hair. She walked toward the community center, adrenaline sharpening every sense. The building's windows glowed with yellow fluorescent light. As she approached, she heard something that stopped her cold. Laughter. Kids' laughter. Miranda pressed herself against the wall beside the entrance and peered through the window. What she saw made no sense at all. The interior was a single large room with cheap tile floors and walls covered in children's artwork and motivational posters. But it was packed, maybe 30 or 40 people, mostly teenagers and young adults, some children. They were sitting at folding tables arranged in rows, and in front of each person was a laptop computer. Not new laptops. Old ones, clearly well used, some with cracked screens or missing keys. But they were running, screens glowing, and every single person in that room was utterly focused. At the front of the room stood Evan Cole. He'd shed his janitor's uniform for jeans and a faded Seattle Seahawks sweatshirt, but it was definitely him. He was gesturing at a projection screen that showed lines of code, his voice carrying through the window, although Miranda couldn't make out the specific words. Whatever he was teaching, the students were riveting. A teenage girl in the front row had her hand raised, practically bouncing in her seat with a question. A boy who couldn't have been more than 10 was typing furiously, tongue caught between his teeth in concentration. Evan crouched beside an older woman struggling with her keyboard, gently guiding her fingers to the correct keys, patient as a saint. The woman's face lit up when whatever she'd been attempting finally worked, and Evan gave her a high five that made her laugh so hard she had to wipe her eyes. Miranda felt her carefully constructed narrative crumbling. This wasn't a handoff. This wasn't a crime. This was... Can I help you? Miranda spun around. The woman in the hijab from earlier stood behind her, arms crossed, expression protective but not hostile. Up close, she was younger than Miranda had initially thought. Maybe early 30s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Miranda's mind went blank. She was a CEO who'd negotiated billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, but right now she couldn't string together a coherent lie. I I saw the lights. I didn't know what this place was. The woman's expression softened slightly. We're a coding class. Basic digital literacy, resume building, job skills. Evan volunteers 3 nights a week to teach. Are you interested in enrolling? Evan? The janitor? Something flickered across the woman's face. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. Among other things, I'm Amira Hassan. I run this center, or try to anyway. We're always looking for new students, and volunteers if you have any tech skills. Miranda's phone buzzed in her pocket, but she ignored it. How long has he been teaching here? About 6 months. He walked in one day with a box of old laptops he'd refurbished and asked if we needed a computer teacher. Best thing that's happened to this place in years. Amira's eyes narrowed. Why? Do you know Evan? No, not really. But you're asking about him. Through the window, Miranda watched Evan help a teenage boy debug a section of code, their heads bent together over the laptop screen. The patience in his body language, the way he explained something without making the kid feel stupid, it was the opposite of how she'd imagined a corporate spy would behave. Those computers, Miranda said slowly, where did they come from? Evan refurbishes them, pulls them from recycling centers, repair shops, anywhere he can find equipment that still works but companies throw away. He fixes them up, installs fresh software, brings them here. Some of these kids have never had access to a computer before. He's changing their lives. Miranda's phone buzzed again. She pulled it out and saw 3 texts from Harris. Background on Northside Center. Nonprofit, barely funded, serves low-income neighborhood. No red flags. Evan Cole's financials. He's underwater. Behind on rent, car payment, medical bills from his son's hospital stay last year. No unexplained deposits. Miranda, I don't think he's our leak. I think he's just a guy trying to help. She stared at the messages, then at the scene through the window. The storage containers she'd seen Evan carry inside were now open on a side table. Inside, she could see not stolen technology, but cables, mouse units, power adapters, exactly the kind of miscellaneous equipment that accumulated in every tech company's storage rooms and eventually got thrown away. God, Miranda whispered. Are you okay? Amira asked. I need to go. Miranda turned away, her face burning with shame. I'm sorry for bothering you. Wait, what's your name? But Miranda was already walking fast toward her Mercedes, head down, trying to outpace the realization of what she'd almost done. She'd been so certain, so ready to believe the worst. She'd followed a man who was teaching underprivileged kids how to code, who was giving them opportunities they'd never have otherwise, who was doing it on his own time with salvaged equipment, and she'd suspected him of being a traitor. She reached her car and leaned against it, pressing her palms against her eyes. The rain had picked up again, cold drops sliding down her neck. Her phone rang. Harris. I saw your messages, she said before he could speak. You were right. I was wrong. I'll deal with it tomorrow. Miranda, wait. There's something else. I kept digging into his background, into why he's working as a janitor in the first place. Harris, He used to be one of us. A systems architect, senior level. He worked at Meditech Solutions 15 years ago. His name is all over their early patents for medical data security protocols. The same protocols we licensed as the foundation for our current encryption system. Miranda went very still. What? Evan Cole didn't just work in tech. He helped build the infrastructure our entire company depends on. Then he disappeared from the industry. I can't find any record of him working in technology after 2017. It's like he just quit. People don't just quit that kind of career, not when they're that good. Exactly. So I dug deeper, found some old news articles. In 2017, Meditech was rushing to launch a new patient data management system. Evan was the lead architect. He identified critical security flaws in the code, flaws that could have exposed patient records to hackers. He pushed to delay the launch to fix them. The executives overruled him. They launched anyway. Miranda felt a chill that had nothing to do with the rain. What happened? 6 months later, the system was breached. Thousands of patient records exposed, including HIV status, psychiatric diagnoses, substance abuse treatment history. The lawsuits destroyed Meditech, but before that happened, they needed a scapegoat. Guess who they blamed? Evan. They claimed he'd signed off on the faulty code, produced documentation with his digital signature that he swears was forged. He fought it, but they had better lawyers. By the time the dust settled, he was blacklisted in the industry. No tech company would touch him. His wife, she was a pediatric surgeon, couldn't handle the stress, filed for divorce. Then 6 months later, she was killed in a car accident, left him with a 4-year-old son and a reputation that made him unemployable in the only field he knew. Miranda's legs felt weak. She slid down to sit on the curb, still holding her phone to her ear. So he became a janitor. Took whatever work he could find to support his kid. But Miranda, here's the thing.
I accessed Nexus's network logs from the last 2 months. Those times we thought he was in restricted areas.
He was accessing our systems, but not to steal anything. He was fixing things, patching security vulnerabilities in our code that our own team missed, optimizing processes that were slowing down our servers. He's been making our systems better, on his own time, without being asked. Why would he do that? I don't know. Maybe he couldn't help himself. Maybe it's like a surgeon who sees someone choking in a restaurant. You don't ignore it just because you're off duty. Miranda thought about Sophie, about the way her daughter's eyes lit up when Miranda explained how computers worked, how information traveled through networks at the speed of light. Sophie wanted to be an engineer someday. She wanted to build things that mattered. What would Miranda tell Sophie if she knew her mother had almost destroyed a man for trying to help?
Harris, she said quietly, thank you for digging, for stopping me from making a catastrophic mistake. What are you going to do? I don't know yet, but I'm going to figure out a way to make this right. She ended the call and sat there in the rain, watching the lights of the community center. Inside, Evan Cole was probably still teaching, still patiently showing kids from broken neighborhoods that they could build futures beyond what anyone expected of them. Using equipment he'd salvaged from companies like hers, companies that threw away perfectly good technology rather than finding people who needed it. She'd been so focused on protecting her company from threats that she'd stopped seeing the people who could help it grow. She'd become exactly what she'd hated in her ex-husband, someone who assumed the worst, who protected assets rather than building trust. Miranda pulled out her phone and opened her notes app.
She started typing, fingers flying across the screen as the rain soaked through her sweater, and her mind raced ahead to tomorrow, to the conversation she'd need to have with Evan Cole. She'd built Nexus Technologies on the principle that innovation came from diverse perspectives, from taking risks on unconventional solutions. She'd just been so busy defending her castle that she forgot to look for the treasure buried right outside its walls. Tomorrow, that would change. One way or another, she'd find a way to talk to Evan without revealing that she'd followed him, without admitting she'd suspected him of being a criminal. She'd find a way to understand why a man with his skills was cleaning floors instead of writing code. And maybe she'd find a way to fix what the industry had broken. But first, she needed to get home. Sophie would be waiting for her in the morning, asking in that hopeful 7-year-old voice if maybe today they could have breakfast together. For once, Miranda thought, the answer would be yes. She stood up, soaked and cold and strangely energized despite the late hour. As she opened her car door, her phone buzzed one final time. A text from an unknown number. I know you were there. Tomorrow we should talk. Evan. Miranda's heart stopped. She looked back at the community center, but there was no way to see inside from this angle, no way to know if he was watching her even now. How had he known? The cameras she'd been so careful to avoid? No, not cameras. Instinct. The same instinct that let him identify security flaws no one else could see, that let him read code like poetry, that kept him one step ahead of corporate executives who'd tried to destroy him. He'd known she was there because people like him always knew when they were being hunted. Miranda climbed into her Mercedes, her hands shaking slightly as she started the engine. Tomorrow, she'd talk to him. Tomorrow, she'd figure out what to say to a man she'd wronged before they'd ever met. Tonight, she'd drive home and hold her daughter and remember why she'd started this company in the first place, to build something that mattered, something that helped people, something that would make Sophie proud. She pulled away from the curb and headed back toward the glittering downtown skyline. leaving the community center glowing in her rearview mirror like a lighthouse in a forgotten part of the city. Tomorrow would bring its own complications. Tonight had brought something she hadn't expected. A reminder that the most valuable things were often found in places you weren't looking, carried by people you'd never thought to see. And as Miranda drove through the rain-slick streets of Seattle, she realized that for the first time in 3 years, she was actually looking forward to going to work in the morning. Because tomorrow, everything would change. Miranda didn't sleep that night. She sat at her kitchen table until dawn, Sophie's soft breathing audible through the baby monitor she probably didn't need anymore but couldn't bring herself to remove. The text from Evan Cole glowed on her phone screen like an accusation. "I know you were there. Tomorrow, we should talk." She'd typed and deleted 17 different responses before finally settling on, "My office." 8 a.m.? His reply came at 6:47 a.m., just as pale light started filtering through her kitchen blinds. "I have to drop my son at school." 9:30. "And not your office. The cafe across the street." Miranda stared at those words, analyzing the power dynamic in his choice. He wasn't coming to her territory. He was setting the terms. "Smart." She typed back, "Fine." Now, at 9:15, she sat in a corner booth at Grind Coffee, the trendy cafe that serviced the morning rush of Nexus employees with overpriced lattes and artisanal pastries. She'd chosen a table with a view of both entrances, old habits from her divorce lawyer's advice about always controlling the space. Her espresso sat untouched, going cold while she rehearsed opening lines in her head. "I owe you an apology. Too weak. I was doing my job as CEO. Too defensive. I know who you are, who you really are. Too aggressive." The bell above the door chimed. Evan Cole walked in, and Miranda's carefully prepared speeches evaporated. In the harsh morning light, he looked different than he had on the security footage or through the rain-streaked windows of the community center. Tired, yes. The lines around his eyes spoke of too many late nights and too much responsibility. But there was something else, a quiet dignity in the way he moved, like a man who'd survived being broken and decided to keep walking anyway. He spotted her immediately. Their eyes met, and Miranda felt something twist in her chest. Not fear exactly, but recognition. She knew that look. She'd seen it in her own mirror after the divorce finalized, after her ex-husband's lawyers had finished eviscerating her in court, after she'd rebuilt herself into someone harder and sharper and lonelier. Evan ordered black coffee at the counter, declined the barista's enthusiastic upselling, and walked to her table. He didn't ask permission to sit, just pulled out the chair and settled across from her, those dark eyes steady and unreadable. "Miss Hayes," he said. His voice was deeper than she'd expected, with a rough edge that suggested too much coffee and not enough rest. "You knew I was there last night." Not a question, an opening. "I saw your car, Mercedes SUV, black, parked in a spot with a clear sightline to the community center entrance. Either you were the world's worst car thief scoping an easy target, or someone was watching me." He took a sip of his coffee. "Given that you're the CEO of the company where I work, the second option seemed more likely." Miranda felt her cheeks heat. "I should explain. You thought I was stealing from Nexus." The bluntness of it stole her breath. Yes. The security footage showed you in restricted areas, areas you had no authorization to access. What was I supposed to think? That maybe there was an explanation that didn't involve corporate espionage? His tone wasn't angry, exactly, just tired. Or were you too busy looking for betrayal to consider any other possibility? The words hit harder than Miranda expected. She set down her cup carefully, buying time. "You're right, I jumped to conclusions, but in my defense, I have reasons to be paranoid, suspicious, unable to trust anyone." Evan leaned back in his chair. "Yeah, I know all about that. Funny how getting destroyed by people you trusted will do that to you." Miranda's eyes narrowed. "You know I had you investigated. Harris isn't as subtle as he thinks. I've been watching security probes into my background for the last 48 hours. Took me about 10 minutes to figure out they were coming from Nexus's internal systems." He smiled, but there was no humor in it. "You want to know the irony? I've been doing the same thing, watching your company's security protocols, monitoring your network traffic. checking for vulnerabilities. The difference is, I was trying to help. Why? The question hung between them. Evan studied her face for a long moment, and Miranda had the uncomfortable sensation of being read like one of his code sequences, analyzed, debugged, understood in ways she didn't want to be. Because I can't help myself, he said finally. You put me in a building full of systems I designed the foundation for. Systems that have been patched and updated by people who don't understand the original architecture. I see the flaws. I see where your security is weak, where your code is inefficient. And he stopped, jaw tightening. I can't just ignore it. Even though the tech industry destroyed you, his eyes flashed. The tech industry didn't destroy me. Cowards in expensive suits destroyed me. Executives who cared more about quarterly earnings than patient safety. There's a difference. Miranda thought about her own expensive suits, her own quarterly earnings reports. Is that why you're working as a janitor? Because you can't get hired anywhere else? I'm working as a janitor because it pays my bills and lets me be there when my son gets home from school, because it's honest work that doesn't require me to compromise my ethics or watch people make dangerous decisions for profit. He paused. And because nobody looks at janitors. We're invisible. Which means I can move through your building and fix the things your own engineers are too proud or too rushed to notice. The server room repairs, Miranda said slowly. The optimization protocols. That was you. Your quantum processing units were overheating because someone installed them without proper thermal regulation. Your encryption algorithms had a timing vulnerability that would have been exploited the second you went public. Your backup systems were configured in a way that would have failed catastrophically in an actual emergency. Evan's voice remained level, but intensity burned beneath it. I fixed them. All of them. On my own time, without being asked. Why? Miranda asked again, but this time the question meant something different. Because what you're building matters. Medical data encryption, financial security protocols. These aren't just products, they're protections. They're the walls that keep people's most vulnerable information safe. And I spent 4 years watching what happens when those walls fail. His hands tightened around his coffee cup. My wife was a pediatric surgeon. When our son was diagnosed with leukemia, she had to disclose it in her hospital's system. When Meditech got breached because they launched with flaws I'd warned them about, his medical records were exposed, published on the dark web. His diagnosis, his treatment protocols, everything. He was 3 years old. Miranda felt something crack inside her chest. Evan, do you know what it's like to explain to a toddler why strangers on the internet know he's sick? Why reporters showed up at our house asking for comments about the Meditech whistleblower's son? Evan's voice didn't rise, but the pain in it was visceral. My wife couldn't handle it. The stress, the lawsuits, watching me get blacklisted while the executives who made the actual decisions walked away with golden parachutes. She filed for divorce. 6 months later, she fell asleep at the wheel driving home from a 30-hour shift. Crashed into a concrete barrier on I-5. The cafe sounds faded. The hiss of the espresso machine. The chatter of customers. The clink of ceramic cups. Miranda heard only her own heartbeat and the rawness in Evan's words. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I don't want your pity. Evan met her eyes. I want you to understand why I can't ignore bad code, why I can't walk past security flaws, why I spend my nights teaching kids in a community center that can barely afford electricity. Because I failed once. I couldn't stop executives from making a catastrophic mistake, and people suffered for it. My family suffered for it. I won't fail again. Miranda set her coffee down with shaking hands. The equipment you brought to the community center, the computers, the cables, you're salvaging them from Nexus. From your e-waste, the equipment you're legally required to recycle or dispose of properly. I'm pulling it before it goes to the dump, refurbishing it, giving it to people who need it. Is that stealing? Technically, maybe. Ethically? He shrugged. I sleep fine at night. How did you get the access codes, the key cards? A ghost of a smile crossed Evan's face. I designed the original security protocols your system is based on, remember? I know every backdoor, every override sequence, your biometric scanners. I installed failsafes in the code 15 years ago for emergency maintenance. They're still there. Your engineers probably don't even know they exist. Miranda should have been angry, should have been calling security, calling lawyers, protecting her company. Instead, she found herself asking, "What's your son's name?" The question seemed to surprise him. "Tyler. He's 7, fully recovered, thanks to treatment that wouldn't have been possible without properly secured medical data systems. The irony isn't lost on me. My daughter's 7 too, Sophie. She wants to be an engineer when she grows up." "Does she?" "She's obsessed with how things work. Takes apart every toy I buy her just to see what's inside. Drives me crazy, but..." Miranda found herself smiling despite everything. She's brilliant, fearless, everything I wish I'd been at her age. Tyler's the opposite. Quiet, careful, loves books more than screens, which feels like betrayal given his father's career. Evan's expression softened. But he's kind. Thinks about other people's feelings before his own. After everything he's been through, he could have become bitter. Instead, he became gentle. They sat in silence for a moment, two single parents trading the currency of their children's characteristics like other people traded business cards. Miranda thought about Sophie's questions last week. "Why do you work so much, Mommy? Don't you like being home with me?" And the guilt that had kept her awake long after Sophie fell asleep. "I followed you last night because I was terrified," Miranda said quietly. "Not just of corporate espionage, of being betrayed again. My ex-husband was my CFO, spent 2 years embezzling from our first company while I was pregnant, and then building the business back after Sophie was born. By the time I discovered it, he'd hidden everything. The lawyers, the investigators, they found enough to prove he did it, but not enough to recover the money. He walked away with millions while I got Sophie and a mountain of debt." Evan's expression shifted. "That's why you started over. Why Nexus exists. I built this company from nothing, mortgaged everything I owned, worked 100-hour weeks, missed every bedtime story and school play, because I needed to prove I could succeed without him, that I could build something secure." She laughed bitterly. "And then I spent last night ready to destroy you because I saw a janitor in the wrong hallway at the wrong time." "You saw a threat," Evan said. "Given your history, that's not paranoia, that's survival instinct." "No, I saw what I expected to see. I've been so focused on protecting Nexus from external threats that I stopped seeing the people inside it. People like you, who could help us be better." "I'm just a janitor, Ms. Hayes. Stop calling yourself that. You're a systems architect who happens to clean floors. There's a difference." Evan studied her carefully. "What are you suggesting?" Miranda took a deep breath. This was the moment, the decision that would either salvage this disaster or make it exponentially worse. "I'm suggesting you stop sneaking into my server rooms in the middle of the night and start working there during normal business hours, with authorization and a salary that matches your actual skill level. You're offering me a job. I'm offering you your career back." Evan shook his head slowly. "You don't understand. I'm blacklisted. Every major tech company has my name flagged in their recruiting systems. Meditech made sure of that. If you hire me, your competitors will use it against you. Your board will question your judgment. Your investors can deal with it," Miranda said firmly. "My company, my choice. And frankly, after seeing what you've done with salvaged equipment and volunteer time, I'd be an idiot not to want that talent officially on my team. Your head of security will have a stroke. Harris already knows. He's the one who found your background last night, figured out who you really are. And he's okay with this? He thinks you've been doing his job better than he has, which is both impressive and slightly embarrassing for him." Miranda leaned forward. "Look, I'm not going to pretend this isn't complicated. You have every reason not to trust corporate executives. I have legitimate concerns about someone accessing restricted systems without authorization, regardless of intent. But what happened to you at Meditech was wrong. The industry failed you. And if I can't fix what they did, I can at least offer you a chance to do what you're clearly born to do." Evan was quiet for a long moment. "What about the community center? The kids I'm teaching?" "Keep doing it. Hell, I'll support it. Nexus can donate equipment, fund scholarships, create internship programs. You showed me last night that there are brilliant minds being wasted because they don't have access to resources. That's a problem I can actually solve." Why are you doing this? Miranda thought about Sophie's questions, about Tyler's quiet kindness, about two people who'd been broken by betrayal and were trying to build something better from the pieces. Because I'm tired of being afraid, tired of seeing enemies everywhere. And because maybe, if I can trust someone like you, I can start trusting myself again. The cafe door opened, bringing a gust of cold air and a group of Nexus employees. They glanced at Miranda's table, did double takes recognizing their CEO, then quickly found seats on the opposite side of the room. Even here, she was isolated by her position, always watched, never fully present. There's something else, Evan said. Something I need to tell you before you make this offer official. Miranda's stomach tightened. What? Your quantum processing units, the ones you're launching in 72 hours. They're brilliant, revolutionary. They're also going to fail catastrophically if you launch on schedule. The words hit like ice water. Excuse me? The thermal regulation I fixed? That was a band-aid. The real problem is deeper, in the core architecture. The units will work perfectly for about 6 months. Then the quantum processors will start degrading due to cumulative thermal stress. You'll see data corruption first, then complete system failures. By month 8, every unit you've sold will be bricking itself. Miranda's hands went cold. You're certain? I've spent the last month reverse engineering your prototypes during my night shifts, running simulations, stress testing the protocols. I'm certain. Evan pulled a flash drive from his pocket and set it on the table between them. This contains my full analysis, the failure projections, and 3 possible solutions. Each one requires delaying your launch by at least 60 days. 60 days? Miranda felt the words like a physical blow. The board will never approve it. Our investors are expecting a revolutionary product that works, not one that fails spectacularly and destroys your company's reputation. Evan's voice was gentle but firm. I know what it's like to watch executives prioritize schedule over safety. I watched it destroy Meditech. I watched it destroy my family. I won't watch it happen again. Miranda reached for the flash drive with trembling fingers. If you're right, if this data is accurate, we're looking at potential lawsuits, stock collapse, everything I've built. We'll survive, Evan said, if you delay the launch, fix the problems, and go to market with a product that actually works as promised. Companies recover from delays. They don't recover from catastrophic product failures. You could have kept this to yourself. Let us fail. After what the industry did to you, no one would blame you. Tyler would blame me. He's old enough now to understand what I do, what I'm teaching at the community center. How do I tell him that ethics matter, that doing the right thing matters if I watch a company make the same mistake that destroyed our family and say nothing? Miranda looked at this man, this janitor who wasn't really a janitor, this architect who'd been cast out and crawled back anyway, this father who was teaching his son that decency mattered more than revenge. She thought about Sophie, about the example she was setting with 100-hour work weeks and an empty house. If I delay this launch, the board might remove me as CEO, she said quietly. The investors might pull funding. Everything I've sacrificed for could fall apart. Yes. And you're telling me to do it anyway. I'm telling you that some failures are recoverable, others aren't. You get to choose which one you want to face. Miranda stood abruptly, the flash drive clutched in her hand. Come with me, right now. Evan blinked. Where? Nexus. I need my senior engineering team to see this data immediately. We have 72 hours to make a decision, and I'm not making it without every relevant expert in the room. Miranda, Ms. Hayes, they're going to recognize me. My name is still toxic in this industry. Good. Let them see what happens when the industry throws away talent. Let them see what we almost missed because we were too busy protecting our asses to notice brilliance in a janitor's uniform. She grabbed her coat. You wanted to help? Then help. No more sneaking around. No more fixing things in secret. Stand in front of my team and tell them what you told me. Evan stood slowly, uncertainty written across his face. You're sure about this? I'm not sure about anything, but I'm done making decisions based on fear. Miranda headed for the door, then paused and looked back. Are you coming or not? He followed. They walked across the street to Nexus Technologies in silence, the morning rush flowing around them like river water around stones. Miranda's mind raced through the implications. The board meeting she'd have to call, the investor calls, the media management. Everything she'd carefully built was about to be tested in ways she'd never anticipated. The lobby security guard looked up as they entered. "Good morning, Ms. Hayes."
Sir, I'll need to see your... He stopped, recognizing Evan. Oh, Evan, you're early today. He's with me, Miranda said crisply. Clear him for executive floor access. The guard's eyes widened. The executive floor? Ma'am, I don't have authorization to... You do now. Make it happen. They rode the elevator in tense silence. Miranda could feel Evan's discomfort radiating like heat, the way his shoulders tightened as the floors climbed higher. She understood. The last time he'd been in a corporate executive suite, they'd been destroying his career. The doors opened on the 18th floor, where floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Seattle's skyline and abstract art that cost more than Evan probably made in a year decorated the walls. Miranda's assistant, James, looked up from his desk and did a visible double-take at Evan's presence. "Clear my calendar for the rest of the day," Miranda told him. "Get Harris up here. Then I need Robert Chen from engineering, Priya Sharma from R&D, and David Wong from product development. Conference room A in 15 minutes. All of them?" James's voice climbed an octave. "Ms. Hayes, Robert is presenting to the board at... Tell him the board meeting is postponed. This is more important." James's mouth opened, then closed. He'd worked for Miranda long enough to recognize when she was operating on instinct and adrenaline, the dangerous combination that either saved companies or destroyed them. "Yes, ma'am. Should I tell them what this is about?" "Tell them we're reviewing the launch timeline, nothing more." Miranda led Evan to her private office, that corner space with its ridiculous view and minimalist furniture that was supposed to project success. It felt hollow suddenly, all that careful image crafting. She thought about Evan's community center with its peeling paint and secondhand tables and realized which space felt more real. "You can still walk away," Evan said quietly. "Show that data to your team anonymously. Pretend you found it yourself. I don't need credit. I'm not protecting you. I'm protecting my company. And the only way to do that is with complete honesty about where this information came from and why we missed it ourselves." Miranda pulled up her email and started typing. "I'm sending a message to the board right now. Emergency meeting for tomorrow morning. They're going to lose their minds." "Miranda, I spent 3 years being afraid of betrayal, afraid of failure, afraid that if I lowered my guard for even a second, everything would fall apart." She hit send and looked at him. "Last night, I followed you because I was certain you were destroying my company. Turns out you're the one trying to save it." Conference room A filled quickly. Harris arrived first, took one look at Evan, and nodded like he'd been expecting this. Then came Robert Chen, Nexus's chief engineer, a brilliant MIT graduate who'd been personally recruited by Miranda. His eyes widened when he saw Evan sitting at the conference table like he belonged there. "What's going on?" Robert asked Miranda, his gaze still fixed on Evan. "James said you were reviewing the launch timeline. Why is... Sit down," Miranda said. "Everyone, sit." Priya Sharma entered next, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, tablet in hand. She'd been with Nexus since the beginning, had worked 80-hour weeks to develop the quantum encryption protocols. She stopped dead when she saw Evan. "You," she breathed. "You're Evan Cole." The room went silent. David Wong, who'd been checking his phone, looked up sharply. "Evan Cole?" "The Meditech whistleblower," Evan supplied. "Not thief, not saboteur, whistleblower. Though I understand the industry prefers different terminology." Robert stood abruptly. "Miranda, what is this? Why is he here?" "Because he knows our system better than any of us do. Because he helped design the foundation we've been building on. And because..." Miranda took a breath. "He's identified critical flaws in our quantum processing units that will cause catastrophic failures if we launch on schedule." The statement detonated like a bomb. Everyone started talking at once, voices overlapping in protest and confusion. Miranda let it happen for exactly 10 seconds, then slammed her hand on the conference table. "Enough. Evan, show them." He plugged the flash drive into the conference room computer. The main screen filled with code, simulations, thermal imaging data.
Evan stood and began walking them through his analysis, his voice steady and professional despite the hostility radiating from every person in the room. Miranda watched her team's faces as Evan explained the problem, watched skepticism gradually shift to concern, then to horror as they realized he was right. Priya pulled up her own tablet and started running parallel calculations, her fingers flying across the screen. Robert's face went gray as he studied the failure projections. "This can't be right," David said, but his voice lacked conviction. "We've done extensive testing." "You've done 6-month testing," Evan interrupted. "The degradation doesn't become critical until month 8. By then, every unit you've sold will be experiencing data corruption. By month 10, complete system failure." "How did we miss this?" Priya whispered. "Because you were focused on meeting a launch deadline," Evan said without judgment. "Because your testing protocols followed industry standards that assume certain baseline conditions. Because you didn't have someone who understood the original architecture well enough to see where the new implementations would fail." But Robert looked at Miranda, his expression stricken. "If he's right." "He is," Priya said quietly. She turned her tablet around, showing her calculations. "I just ran the numbers independently. He's absolutely right. We're sitting on a time bomb." The room fell silent except for the hum of the building's climate control. Miranda looked at each of her team members, seeing her own fear reflected in their faces. Everything they'd worked for, about to collapse. "We delay the launch," she said. 60 days, fix every problem Evans identified. Go to market with a product that works. "The board will never approve that," David said. "Our investors will have to trust that I know what I'm doing." Miranda's voice was steel. "I'd rather face angry investors than class action lawsuits from hospitals and banks whose data we corrupted." "And him?" Robert gestured at Evan. "What's his role in all this?" Miranda looked at Evan, at this man who'd lost everything and still cared enough to save a company that had never valued him. "He's our new senior systems architect, effective immediately." The protests erupted again, but Miranda cut through them. "This meeting is over. You have your assignments. Priya, work with Evan to develop the fixed protocols. Robert, start drafting the technical briefing for the board. David, you're with me. We need to prepare the investor communications. Harris, I need you to start documenting how Evan accessed our systems so we can plug those security gaps." "Actually," Harris said, "I'd rather have him show us how he did it. Might learn something." Evan smiled slightly. "I'd be happy to. Your biometric systems have 17 different vulnerabilities I can think of off the top of my head." 17? Harris looked offended and impressed in equal measure. "Could be more. I stopped counting after the first dozen." As the team filed out, still muttering to each other, Priya lingered. She approached Evan cautiously, like he might bolt. "I read your original papers on medical data encryption, the ones you published before Meditech. They were brilliant." "Thank you. What they did to you was wrong. Everyone in the industry knows it, even if no one says it out loud." She held out her hand. "I'm glad you're here." Evan shook her hand, and Miranda saw something shift in his expression. Not quite trust, but the beginning of possibility. After everyone left, Miranda and Evan stood alone in the conference room. Through the windows, Seattle stretched out below them, all that frantic motion and desperate ambition. "I can't believe you just did that," Evan said. "I can't either." Miranda felt lightheaded, like she'd just stepped off a cliff and discovered she could fly. "Tomorrow, I have to convince my board not to fire me. But tonight, I'm going home to have dinner with my daughter for the first time in 2 weeks. She'll like that." "What about Tyler? Does he know what you do at Nexus?" "He knows I clean there. Doesn't know about the other part. I've been trying to protect him from the tech industry after what it did to our family." Miranda thought about Sophie's questions, about the distance she'd been putting between herself and everyone who might hurt her again. Maybe we've both been protecting our kids too much. Maybe we should be showing them that sometimes the brave thing is to trust again. Evan looked at her carefully. "Is that what this is? Trust?" "I don't know yet, but I think it might be the beginning of it." Her phone buzzed. A text from James. "Board members are already calling. This is going to be messy." Miranda typed back, "Let it be messy. Schedule the meeting for 8 a.m. She looked at Evan. "You should go home. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be brutal.
Are you going to be okay? The question surprised her with its gentleness. I don't know, but I'm going to try. That's all any of us can do, right? Evan nodded and headed for the door. Then he paused. Miranda? Thank you for listening, for believing me, for taking the risk. Thank you for caring enough to speak up. After everything, you could have walked away. No, Evan said quietly. I really couldn't. It's not who I am. After he left, Miranda stood alone in her office and looked at the city below. Somewhere out there, Sophie was in her second grade classroom, learning about fractions or spelling or whatever 7-year-olds learned. Somewhere, Tyler was in his own classroom, that gentle boy who'd survived cancer and loss. Tomorrow, Miranda would fight for her company. Tonight, she'd fight for something more important, the kind of life where she didn't have to choose between success and being present for the people who mattered.
She grabbed her phone and called her mother. Can you keep Sophie for one more night? I need to prepare for a board meeting. But tomorrow I'm taking a personal day. Tell Sophie we're going to the zoo, just the two of us. Her mother's surprise was audible. Really? Miranda, when's the last time you... Too long. Way too long. Tell her I love her. Tell her mommy's coming home. She ended the call and started preparing for the battle ahead. But for the first time in 3 years, Miranda Hayes felt like she was fighting for the right things. Not just success, not just survival, something better than both. The board meeting started exactly the way Miranda expected, badly. She'd barely finished explaining the 60-day launch delay before Thomas Brightwell, the venture capital partner who'd funded Nexus's Series B round, slammed his leather portfolio on the mahogany table hard enough to make everyone flinch. Absolutely not, he said, his face flushed red above his expensive suit collar. We have contracts, Miranda, commitments to hospitals, financial institutions, government agencies. You can't just, I can and I am. Miranda stood at the head of the conference table, projecting a confidence she didn't entirely feel. Behind her, the presentation screen showed Evan's failure analysis. Those damning thermal degradation curves that proved her flagship product was a disaster waiting to happen. The alternative is launching a product that will catastrophically fail within 8 months, destroying our reputation and exposing us to lawsuits that would bankrupt this company. Based on the analysis of a disgraced janitor? Victoria Chen, the board's CFO appointee, shook her head. Do you understand how this looks? You're throwing away our entire launch strategy because someone with a vendetta against the tech industry told you scary stories about thermal stress. Evan Cole doesn't have a vendetta. He has expertise that none of us possess. Miranda clicked to the next slide, showing Priya's independent verification. Our own chief of R&D confirmed his findings. The flaws are real. The timeline is accurate. We launch now, we destroy everything we've built. Or we don't launch at all because you've scared away every investor we have, Thomas shot back. I've already received 3 calls this morning from other board members threatening to pull their backing. The market doesn't reward delays, Miranda. It punishes them. Richard Morrison, the eldest board member and a tech industry veteran who'd built and sold 2 companies before retiring to advise others, raised his hand for silence. Unlike the others, he'd been studying Evan's data with the careful attention of someone who actually understood code architecture. His silver hair caught the morning light as he leaned back in his chair. I know Evan Cole, he said quietly. Worked with him 15 years ago on a consulting project. Brilliant mind, uncompromising ethics. Meditech destroyed him for being right about their security flaws. Everything he predicted came true 6 months after they forced him out. The room went silent. Thomas's bluster deflated slightly. You're saying we should trust him? I'm saying Miranda is right to listen to him, and I'm saying that if we ignore this warning, we deserve everything that happens to us. Richard looked at Miranda with something like respect. The question isn't whether to delay. It's how we manage the delay without destroying investor confidence. We can't, Victoria said flatly. The moment we announce a delay, our stock price will crater. Competitors will swoop in with their own solutions. We'll lose market position, we'll never recover. Then we don't announce it as a delay, Miranda said. She'd been up until 3 a.m. working through scenarios with David Wong, preparing for exactly this resistance. We announce it as an enhancement. We tell our clients that during final testing, we identified opportunities to improve performance by an additional 30%. We're taking 2 months to implement those improvements because we're committed to delivering the absolute best product possible. That's spin, Thomas said. That's truth. Evan's proposed fixes don't just prevent failures, they actually improve the system's efficiency. We delay the launch, but we deliver something even better than promised. Miranda clicked to another slide showing the projected performance improvements. Our clients don't want the product 2 months early. They want the product that works flawlessly for 20 years. Richard nodded slowly. It could work. We'd need to manage the narrative carefully, keep the technical details confidential, focus on the enhanced capabilities rather than the problems we're fixing. And Cole, Victoria asked, what's his role going forward? Senior Systems Architect. He's already working with Priya's team to implement the fixes. You hired him without board approval? I hired the person most qualified to save this company. If you want to fire me for that, go ahead. But you'll be doing it without the one person who can actually make our launch successful. Miranda met each board member's eyes in turn. I'm not asking permission. I'm informing you of the decision I've made as CEO. You can support it or replace me. Those are your options. The silence stretched like a wire pulled tight. Finally, Richard spoke. I move that we approve Miranda's recommended 60-day delay and enhanced product launch strategy. All in favor? His hand went up. After a long pause, 2 other hands joined his. Thomas and Victoria sat with arms crossed, faces stormy. The vote stood at 3-2, enough to proceed, but hardly a ringing endorsement. Meeting adjourned, Richard said. Miranda, I'd like a word. The others filed out, Thomas making a point of letting the door slam behind him. Richard remained seated, studying Miranda with those sharp eyes that had seen decades of corporate drama play out. You just burned a lot of political capital, he said. Thomas won't forget this. I know. Was it worth it? Miranda thought about Evan's story, about his son's medical records exposed because executives prioritize profits over security, about a wife who died under the crushing weight of consequences that should have fallen on the people actually responsible. Yes, it was worth it. Good. Richard stood and gathered his papers. Because you're right, and being right doesn't always feel good in the moment, but it's the only thing that matters in the long run. Keep me informed on the development progress. And Miranda, be careful with Cole. The industry hasn't forgotten what happened at Meditech. Some people will see his presence here as vindication. Others will see it as you consorting with a traitor. Let them see whatever they want. I'm done making decisions based on other people's opinions. Richard smiled. Now you sound like a real CEO. After he left, Miranda stood alone in the conference room, adrenaline slowly draining from her system. Through the windows, Seattle sparkled in rare November sunshine. All those glass towers full of companies making similar decisions about profit versus principle. She wondered how many of them chose correctly. Her phone buzzed, a text from Evan. How bad was it? She typed back. I still have a job, barely. How's the development going? Priya's team is incredible. We should have the first fix implemented by end of week. Good. Come to my office at 6. We need to talk about next steps. She spent the rest of the day in back-to-back calls with investors, each one a carefully choreographed dance of reassurance and strategic spin. Yes, they were adjusting the timeline. No, there weren't problems, just opportunities for enhancement. Yes, she was confident in the team. No, she couldn't share technical details, but the results would speak for themselves. By 5:30, her voice was hoarse, and her head pounded with the tension headache that had become her constant companion. She was staring at her computer screen, trying to muster the energy to respond to one more email when James knocked on her door. Ms. Hayes, there's someone here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's important. I don't have time for... It's Amira Hassan from the Northside Community Center. Miranda's exhaustion evaporated. Send her in. Amira entered with the same protective wariness Miranda remembered from their first meeting, but now it was tempered with something else. Curiosity, maybe, or cautious hope. She wore a professional blazer over her hijab, carrying herself with the quiet dignity of someone who'd learned to fight for every resource her community received. Ms. Hayes, thank you for seeing me without notice. Please, sit. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water? I'm fine, thank you. Amira settled into the chair across from Miranda's desk,
studying the office with the same careful attention she'd probably learned running a nonprofit on impossible budgets. I'll be direct. Evan told me what happened, that you hired him, that you're supporting his work at the community center. Word travels fast. In communities like ours, good news travels faster than bad. We need the hope. Amira leaned forward. I came to ask what you're expecting in return. The question was so blunt it took Miranda a moment to process. I'm sorry? In my experience, when wealthy companies offer to help struggling community centers, there are always strings attached. Photo opportunities, tax write-offs, press releases about corporate responsibility that make donors feel good but don't actually change anything. Amira's voice was gentle but firm. I need to know what you're really after before I let you anywhere near my kids. Miranda felt a flash of defensive anger, then recognized it for what it was, the instinct of someone who'd been questioned too many times. She took a breath and chose honesty instead. I don't have a plan. I saw what Evan built with salvaged equipment and volunteer hours, and I realized my company throws away resources that could change lives. That's not some corporate responsibility initiative. That's just waste I didn't know I was generating. And you want to fix it. I want to help. If you'll let me. Amira studied her for a long moment. Why? Because I have a 7-year-old daughter who wants to be an engineer. She has every advantage: good schools, private tutors, access to technology. She'll probably succeed because the world is built for kids like her. But what about the kids who are just as smart, just as capable, who never get the chance because they were born in the wrong zip code? That's not just unfair. It's stupid. We're wasting talent we desperately need. A pretty speech. Do you believe it? 2 days ago? Probably not. I was too busy protecting my company to think about anything else. But then I followed Evan to your center and saw what's possible when someone actually gives a damn. So yes, I believe it now. Amira's expression softened slightly. Evan talks about you like you're some kind of avenging angel who showed up to save his career. I needed to see for myself if that was true, or if he's just desperate to believe someone in the industry still has integrity. What's your assessment? Honestly, I'm not sure yet, but I'm willing to find out. Amira pulled a folder from her bag and set it on Miranda's desk. This is our current budget, our enrollment numbers, our equipment needs, and our curriculum goals. If you're serious about helping, start by understanding what we actually need instead of what you think we need. Miranda opened the folder and felt her heart sink. The numbers were devastating. A shoestring budget held together with grant applications and bake sales, equipment that was ancient even by salvage standards, waiting lists for every program because they couldn't accommodate demand. And yet somehow, Amira and Evan had built something that worked. This is incredible, Miranda said quietly. What you're doing with these resources is barely enough. I have 50 kids on waiting lists because we don't have computers for them. I have volunteers teaching subjects they barely understand themselves because I can't afford real instructors. I have parents begging me to offer more classes, more days, more opportunities, and I have to turn them away because our building isn't big enough and our funding isn't stable. Amira's voice carried the weight of every disappointed child, every missed opportunity. So if you want to help, Ms. Hayes, I need real commitment, not a press conference and a one-time donation. Real, sustained support. What would that look like? Equipment donations on a quarterly schedule so we can actually plan our curriculum. Paid internships at Nexus for our advanced students. Professional instructors teaching specialized skills. A guarantee that you won't pull funding the moment it stops being convenient or profitable for your company's image. Miranda thought about her conversation with the board that morning, about Thomas Brightwell's fury and Victoria Chen's skepticism. Adding a major community investment initiative on top of a delayed launch would be political suicide. The board would revolt. Investors would question her priorities. She thought about Sophie, about the world she was building for her daughter, about Tyler and his gentle resilience, about the kids in that community center who deserve the same chances Sophie took for granted. Done, Miranda said. All of it. I'll set up a foundation to ensure the funding continues regardless of Nexus's quarterly performance. I'll create an internship program starting next summer. I'll work with you to identify what skills we should be teaching and find instructors who actually know what they're doing. Amira blinked. Just like that? Just like that. Though I should warn you, my board is going to lose their minds. I've already pushed them hard today. This might be the thing that gets me fired. And you're doing it anyway. My daughter asked me last week why I work so much. She wanted to know if I liked work more than I liked being with her. Miranda's throat tightened. I told her I was building something important, but I couldn't explain what made it important beyond profits and market share. Now I can. Amira stood and extended her hand. Then we have a deal, Ms. Hayes, but I'll be watching. The moment you turn this into a publicity stunt or start making decisions that hurt my community, I'll shut it down. Are we clear? Perfectly clear. And please, call me Miranda. We'll see.
You have to earn first names in my world. But Amira smiled as she said it, the first genuinely warm expression Miranda had seen from her. After Amira left, Miranda sat staring at the community center's budget folder, feeling something shift in her chest. It wasn't quite peace. She was still exhausted, still facing a board that wanted her head, still navigating a product crisis that could destroy everything. But it was purpose. Real purpose. Beyond survival and revenge and proving she could succeed without her ex-husband. At exactly 6 o'clock, Evan knocked on her door. He'd cleaned up since the morning, fresh shirt, hair still damp from a shower, the permanent tiredness in his eyes fractionally lighter than before. Amira came to see you, he said without preamble. She did. She's protective of her community. I respect that. She called me after, said you committed to a full support program without negotiating, without demanding anything in return. She thinks you're either genuine or completely insane. Probably both. Miranda gestured for him to sit. I need to talk to you about something difficult. Evan's shoulders tensed. You're rescinding the job offer. What? No, the opposite actually, but I need you to understand what you're walking into. Miranda pulled up her email and turned the screen toward him. These are the messages I've received since the board meeting this morning. 17 emails from colleagues at other tech companies, former business partners, industry contacts, all of them expressing concern about my decision to hire you. Evan scanned the emails, his jaw tightening as he read. They're saying I'm a security risk, that I can't be trusted, that you're making a mistake that will cost you your reputation. That's the polite version. 3 of them explicitly threaten to end business relationships if you remain on staff. One suggested I get a psychological evaluation for making such a reckless decision. So you want me to step back, work unofficially. I understand. No. Miranda closed the laptop with more force than necessary. I want you to understand that keeping you on staff is going to cost me, politically, financially, professionally. And I want you to know I'm doing it anyway, because it's the right thing to do, and I'm done letting other people's fear dictate my decisions. Evan was quiet for a long moment. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to know what you're getting into. The industry blacklisted you once. They're going to try to do it again, and this time I'll be collateral damage. If you want to walk away, find a quieter position somewhere else, I'd understand. Would you? Miranda met his eyes. No. Honestly, I'd be disappointed, because I think you and I are building something here that matters more than our reputations. But that has to be your choice, not my expectation. Evan stood and walked to the windows, looking out at the city as the sun began to set behind the Olympic Mountains. The light turned everything gold and amber, softening the hard edges of the downtown towers. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. After Meditech destroyed my career, I spent 2 years applying to every tech company in Seattle. Every single one rejected me without even granting an interview. I was toxic, unemployable. I had a 3-year-old son who'd just lost his mother, medical bills I couldn't pay, and a skill set that was worthless because no one would let me use it. Miranda waited, sensing he needed to say this without interruption. I took the janitor position at Nexus because it was the only job I could get in a building that held the kind of technology I used to create. Every night I'd clean offices where engineers younger than me discussed problems I could solve in my sleep. I'd empty trash cans full of discarded code printouts and want to scream because I could see the errors, the inefficiencies, the vulnerabilities. I was invisible to everyone except the other custodial staff, and some days that invisibility felt like drowning. He turned to face her. You're offering me a chance to breathe again, to be seen for what I can actually do instead of what lies were told about me. So no, I'm not walking away. Not even if the entire industry lines up to condemn us both. Miranda felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back. Okay then, Let's give them something to condemn. Priya says you've made more progress on the fixes in 2 days than her team made in 2 months. Priya's team is excellent. They just needed someone who understood the original architecture. Stop being modest. It's unbecoming. Miranda pulled up a project timeline on her screen. If we're going to hit the 60-day deadline, we need to completely restructure the development workflow. I want you leading the technical implementation. Priya will run project management, but you make the final calls on all architectural decisions. That's going to cause resentment. Her team has been working on this for 3 years. Her team nearly launched a catastrophically flawed product. I think they can handle a little wounded pride in exchange for actually succeeding. Miranda sent him the timeline. I'm also putting you in front of the investors next week. They need to hear directly from you why the delay is necessary and what improvements they can expect. Evan looked like she'd just asked him to jump off a bridge. Miranda, I can't. I'm not good at presentations. I'm an engineer, not a salesman. You taught coding to 40 people in a community center with salvaged equipment and made every single one of them believe they could build a future. You can handle a room full of investors. She softened her voice. I know it's asking a lot, but they need to see who you are, not who the rumors claim you are. And honestly, you're our best argument for why this delay will result in a superior product. What if I freeze up? What if I say the wrong thing and make everything worse? Then I'll jump in and save you. We're a team now, Evan. That means neither of us faces this alone. The words hung in the air between them, meaning more than Miranda had intended. She saw Evan's expression shift, vulnerability flickering across his features before he locked it down. I should get home, he said. Tyler has a science project due tomorrow, and I promised I'd help him build a volcano that actually erupts instead of just fizzing weakly. Miranda smiled. Sophie did the volcano project last year. We ended up with baking soda explosion evidence on the ceiling that I still haven't completely cleaned off. Any advice? Double the containment vessel and do it outside. Trust me. Evan laughed, the sound surprising them both. I'll remember that. Thank you, Miranda. For today. For all of this. Thank you for caring enough to tell me the truth, even when it would have been easier to let us fail. After he left, Miranda finished up a few emails, then grabbed her coat and headed home. For once, she'd actually make it in time for Sophie's bedtime. She was halfway to the parking garage when her phone rang. Harris. Tell me you have good news, she said. Define good. I've been monitoring network traffic like you asked, tracking any unusual access patterns. I found something. Miranda's stomach dropped. What? Someone's been probing our systems from the outside. Sophisticated attacks, testing our security protocols, looking for vulnerabilities. Started about a week ago, right around the time we announced the launch date publicly. Corporate espionage? Looks like it. They're good. Better than most. They haven't breached anything yet, but they're learning our systems, mapping our defenses. I'd say we have maybe 2 weeks before they find a way in. Can you trace them? Working on it. But Miranda, here's the weird part. The attack stopped 48 hours ago, right around the time you brought Evan onto the executive floor. Miranda's mind raced. You think he's involved? I think it's a hell of a coincidence. Either he's connected to these attacks, or someone's been watching him closely enough to know when his status changed at Nexus. Have you talked to him about it? Not yet. Wanted to brief you first. What do you want me to do? Miranda thought about Evan's story. His son's medical records exposed, his wife's death, his years of invisibility and quiet competence. She thought about the look in his eyes when he'd said he wouldn't walk away even if the industry condemned them both. Keep monitoring the attacks, see if they resume. But don't confront Evan yet. If he's involved, we'll catch him. If he's not, I won't destroy the trust we're building based on suspicious timing. That's a risk. Everything about this situation is a risk. I'm choosing which ones to take. She ended the call and stood in the parking garage, car keys in hand, suddenly uncertain. Could she have been wrong about Evan? Could he be playing a longer game, earning her trust while undermining her company from within? No. She'd seen his face when he talked about Tyler, heard the pain when he described watching his family destroyed. That wasn't acting. That was a man who'd been broken and was trying to protect others from the same fate. But doubt was insidious. It crept in through cracks she thought she'd sealed, whispered questions she didn't want to ask. She She'd trusted her ex-husband too, believed in his loyalty right up until the moment the forensic accountants proved she'd been blind. Miranda got into her car and started driving, but instead of heading home, she found herself turning toward Fremont, toward the address Harris had flagged as Evan's apartment. She needed to see him in his natural environment, needed to confirm that everything he'd told her was real. The apartment complex was modest but well-maintained, the kind of place where young professionals and small families lived paycheck to paycheck, but still managed to keep their dignity intact. Miranda parked across the street and sat watching the building, feeling like a stalker. What was she doing? What did she expect to find? Movement caught her eye. Evan emerged from the building's entrance with Tyler beside him, a small boy with Evan's dark hair and his mother's delicate features, carrying a poster board that was clearly the science project. They walked to Evan's beat-up Honda, and Miranda watched as Evan carefully helped Tyler secure the poster board in the back seat, making sure it wouldn't get damaged during the drive. Then Tyler said something that made Evan laugh, and Evan ruffled the boy's hair with such obvious affection that Miranda felt her chest tighten. This was real. The love, the normalcy, the careful way Evan balanced being a father with being a survivor of corporate warfare. You couldn't fake that. She started her car and drove away before they could notice her, feeling guilty for doubting and grateful for the confirmation. Whatever was happening with the security breaches, Evan wasn't behind it. She'd bet everything she'd built on that certainty. Miranda made it home by 8:30. Her mother answered the door with Sophie in her arms, the girl's eyes fighting sleep but lighting up when she saw Miranda. "Mommy, Grandma said you might come home tonight, but I didn't believe her because you never come home before bedtime anymore." The words were innocent, but they cut like knives. Miranda took Sophie from her mother's arms and held her tight, breathing in the scent of children's shampoo and the grape juice Sophie loved. "I know, baby. I'm sorry. But things are going to change now, okay? Mommy's going to be home more." "Really, truly?" "Really, truly. In fact, tomorrow you and I are going to the zoo. Just us." Sophie pulled back to look at her with suspicious hope. "Tomorrow's a school day." "I'm taking the day off. We both are. We're going to see the tigers and the elephants and eat overpriced ice cream." "Is this for real, or are you just saying it?" Miranda kissed her daughter's forehead. "It's for real. I promise." After Sophie finally fell asleep in her own bed, Miranda's mother made tea and they sat in the kitchen like they had when Miranda was young and overwhelmed by high school drama that felt world-ending. "You look different," her mother said. "Exhausted still, but different somehow." "I hired someone this week. Someone the industry says I shouldn't trust." "Are they right?" "No, but I spent tonight doubting myself anyway because trusting people hasn't worked out well for me lately." Her mother reached across the table and took Miranda's hand. "Your ex-husband was a con artist who targeted your trust deliberately. That doesn't mean everyone is. Sometimes people are exactly who they appear to be, broken, trying, deserving of a chance." "When did you get so wise?" "Around the same time I watched my daughter rebuild her life from nothing while raising a child alone." "You've earned the right to take risks, Miranda. You've earned the right to believe in people again." Miranda squeezed her mother's hand and thought about Evan, about the community center, about the choice she'd made to delay the launch, and damn the consequences. Her mother was right. She'd been playing defense for so long she'd forgotten how to build anything that wasn't a wall. Tomorrow, she'd take Sophie to the zoo. Next week, she'd put Evan in front of the investors and dare them to see past the lies they'd been told. Next month, she'd launch a product that actually worked, built by a team that understood the difference between moving fast and moving carefully. And somewhere in all of that, maybe she'd figure out how to be more than just a CEO, more than just a survivor, more than just someone who'd learned not to trust. Maybe she'd figure out how to be someone who built things that mattered with people who believed in the same values. Someone Sophie would be proud of when she was old enough to understand what her mother had chosen to fight for. It wouldn't be easy. The board was already turning against her. Investors were nervous. The industry was watching, waiting for her to fail so they could say they'd been right about Evan Cole all along. But for the first time in 3 years, Miranda Hayes felt like she was fighting the right battles. And win or lose, that had to count for something. The zoo day with Sophie turned out to be exactly what Miranda needed. 6 hours of her daughter's endless questions about why elephants had trunks and whether penguins ever got cold,
punctuated by sticky fingers from cotton candy and a minor meltdown when the tigers were sleeping instead of prowling. Normal problems. Human problems. The kind that had nothing to do with board meetings or product launches or men who'd been destroyed by an industry that should have protected them. But reality crashed back the moment Miranda checked her phone during Sophie's bathroom break. 17 missed calls, 43 emails, 3 urgent texts from Harris that made her blood run cold. They're back. The attacks. More aggressive than before. Evans in the building showed up at midnight last night. Security footage shows him accessing systems he shouldn't have clearance for. Miranda, we need to talk. Now. Her hand shook as she typed back. On my way. Give me an hour. Sophie emerged from the bathroom, face glowing with happiness. Mommy, can we see the gorillas now? Please? Miranda crouched down to her daughter's level, forcing her voice steady. I'm so sorry, sweetie. Mommy has to go to work for a little while. Grandma's going to come pick you up and you can finish the zoo with her, okay? The light in Sophie's eyes dimmed. But you promised. You said today was just for us. I know I did. And I'm so sorry, but something important came up and I have to. You always have to go to work. You always break your promises. Sophie's voice rose, drawing looks from other parents. I hate Nexus. I hate your stupid job. The words hit harder than any board criticism ever had. Miranda pulled Sophie into a hug despite the girl's resistance. You're right. I keep breaking promises and that's not fair to you. But I'm trying to fix something really important right now, something that affects a lot of people. Can you be patient with me just a little longer? No, I want you to stay. Sophie was crying now, hot tears soaking into Miranda's shirt. Why is work always more important than me? Miranda held her daughter and had no good answer. Because the truth was complicated. She was trying to build something secure for Sophie's future, trying to prove she could succeed, trying to help people like Evan who'd been crushed by the same system that had nearly destroyed her. But 7-year-olds didn't understand noble motivations. They understood presence and absence, promises kept and promises broken. I love you more than anything in the world, Miranda whispered, and I'm going to do better. I promise. You always promise. Her mother arrived 20 minutes later, reading the situation instantly. She took Sophie's hand and gave Miranda a look that said, fix this, whatever it is, and then come home and be a mother. Miranda drove back to Nexus with Sophie's words echoing in her head, mixing with her own doubts about Evan, about trust, about whether she was fighting the right battles or just creating new disasters. Harris met her in the lobby, his usually calm demeanor cracked with tension. Conference room C. I've got everything pulled up. The security footage was damning. There was Evan at 11:47 p.m. using a keycard that should have been deactivated, accessing the server room that housed their most sensitive development code. He stayed for 47 minutes. When he emerged, he was carrying a laptop that wasn't his standard equipment. Where is he now? Miranda asked. R&D lab. Been there since 6 this morning, working with Priya's team, acting like nothing happened. Have you confronted him? Waiting for you. I also traced the cyber attacks. They're coming from a server network in Eastern Europe, routing through multiple proxies, professional operation, the kind that costs serious money. Miranda watched the footage loop, Evan's face clearly visible as he glanced at the security camera. He knew they'd see this. He'd look directly at the lens like he wanted them to know. Why would he be so obvious if he was actually stealing? Unless he wasn't stealing. Unless he was doing exactly what he'd done before, fixing things that were broken. Pull up our network logs from last night, Miranda said. Show me what systems he accessed. Harris typed rapidly, pulling up strings of code and access timestamps. He was in the encryption protocols, the backup systems, the user authentication frameworks, all core infrastructure. If he was installing backdoors or extracting proprietary code, these are exactly the systems he'd target. Or the systems he'd need to access to reinforce security against external attacks. Miranda leaned closer to the screen. What did he actually do while he was logged in? That's the thing. I can see what systems he touched, but not what changes he made. He covered his tracks perfectly. Or there are no tracks to cover because he wasn't doing anything wrong. Miranda straightened. I'm going to talk to him. Alone. Miranda, that's not smart. If he's working with the attackers, then I'll deal with it. But I'm not destroying him based on suspicious timing and security footage.
I did that once already, and I was wrong. She found Evan in R&D Lab 3, surrounded by 3 monitors showing cascading code, while Priya stood behind him pointing at something on the center screen. They were deep in technical discussion, voices overlapping with the rapid-fire intensity of engineers solving complex problems. Neither noticed Miranda standing in the doorway. "That subroutine there," Priya was saying. "If we optimize the loop structure, we could reduce processing time by another 8%. Not without introducing a potential race condition in the thread management. Evan's fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up a different section of code. But if we restructure the memory allocation here and here, we get the same speed improvement without the vulnerability. You're right. How did you see that so fast? Pattern recognition. Once you've debugged enough systems, you start recognizing the signatures of where problems hide. Evan glanced up and finally noticed Miranda. Something flickered across his face, not guilt, exactly, but wariness. "Miranda, I wasn't expecting you today. Can we talk, privately?" Priya looked between them, reading the tension. "I'll give you two some space. Evan, send me that restructuring when you're done. I want to run it past the rest of the team." After she left, Evan saved his work and turned to face Miranda fully. "This is about last night. I saw the cameras. I knew you'd have questions. You accessed restricted systems at midnight without authorization. Again, after I specifically hired you to work during normal business hours through proper channels." Miranda kept her voice level. "Help me understand why I shouldn't fire you right now." "Because someone is trying to breach our systems, and I was reinforcing our defenses." Evan pulled up a file on his laptop and turned it toward her. "Look at this. Coordinated attack attempts, probing for vulnerabilities in our user authentication protocols. They're sophisticated, changing their approach every few hours to avoid pattern detection. I spent last night implementing additional security layers that make it exponentially harder for them to find a way in." Miranda studied the data, her tech background enough to recognize what she was seeing. "Why not just tell Harris? Tell me? Why go behind everyone's back?" "Because the attacks were escalating and we were running out of time. Because your security team, as competent as they are, doesn't understand the architecture well enough to see where the real vulnerabilities are. Because I've spent 15 years watching companies prioritize process over protection, and I won't watch Nexus fall because we scheduled a meeting instead of fixing the problem. That's not how teams work, Evan. That's not how trust works." "Trust?" His voice sharpened. "You want to talk about trust? Harris has been monitoring my every move since you hired me. I've seen the security probes, the background checks, the way he watches me like I'm about to steal the silverware. You said we were building something together, but your head of security treats me like a criminal on parole. Can you blame him? You keep accessing systems without permission, showing up at midnight, working in the shadows. What else is he supposed to think? That maybe I'm trying to save your company from the same fate that destroyed Meditech? That maybe I know what I'm doing and you could trust me to do it?" Evan stood, frustration radiating from him. "I told you who I am. I showed you my life, my son, my work at the community center. What more do I need to do to prove I'm not the villain everyone wants me to be?" Miranda felt the weight of Sophie's words from earlier. You always break your promises, colliding with her fear of being betrayed again. Everyone wanted something from her. Everyone had an angle. How was she supposed to know who to trust? "Show me what you did," she said quietly. "Walk me through every system you accessed, every change you made. Prove to me that you were protecting us and not stealing from us." The hurt that flashed across Evan's face made her chest ache, but he nodded and pulled up his work logs. For the next hour, he walked her through every security enhancement, every vulnerability he'd patched, every backdoor he'd sealed against the external attacks. His explanations were thorough, technical, and completely transparent. If he was lying, he was the best liar Miranda had ever encountered. "The attacks stopped 3 hours after I implemented these changes," Evan finished. "They're either regrouping or they've moved on to an easier target. Either way, we bought ourselves time." Miranda sank into a chair, exhaustion crushing down on her. "I want to believe you, but Evan, you have to understand what this looks like from my perspective. I've been burned before by someone I trusted completely, someone who had access to everything and used it to destroy me. The patterns are too similar. I'm not your ex-husband. I know that rationally, but emotionally, I'm terrified. Every time you access systems without permission, every time you work in secret, my brain screams that I'm being betrayed again. She met his eyes. I need you to work within the structure. Talk to Harris before you access restricted systems. Document your work. Let people know what you're doing instead of operating like a lone wolf. Can you do that? Evan was quiet for a long moment. That's hard for me. I've spent 4 years being invisible, fixing things quietly because it was the only way I could contribute. You're asking me to be seen, to trust that people won't use my openness against me. I know, and you're asking me to trust that you won't betray me. We're both terrified of the same thing, being destroyed by someone we let get close. So maybe we need to figure out how to be scared together instead of letting fear keep us apart. The words hung between them, meaning more than just professional collaboration. Miranda saw the moment Evan recognized it too, the way his expression shifted from defensive to vulnerable. My wife used to say I had a savior complex, he said quietly, that I couldn't see a problem without needing to fix it immediately. It drove her crazy, especially toward the end when I was fighting Meditech, and she needed me to just stop, to walk away, to protect our family instead of trying to protect everyone else. His voice cracked. She was right. My need to fix things cost me my marriage and indirectly cost her life. And I still can't stop doing it. That's not a flaw, Evan. That's who you are. You see vulnerabilities in systems and security protocols and community centers that need equipment, and you can't walk past them. That's not a savior complex. That's integrity. It feels like a curse sometimes, like I'm hardwired to sacrifice my own peace for problems that aren't even mine to solve. Miranda thought about Sophie crying at the zoo, about missing bedtime stories and school plays, about building a company at the expense of being present for the person who mattered most. I understand that better than you know. I've been sacrificing my daughter's happiness to build something secure for her future. The logic makes sense until you're standing there holding a 7-year-old who hates your job and just wants her mom home for dinner. What did you do? I'm still figuring it out. But I think maybe the answer isn't choosing between responsibility and presence. It's finding ways to meet both needs without destroying ourselves in the process. She stood. Come with me. We're going to talk to Harris together. You're going to explain what you did last night, show him the security improvements, and then you're going to promise him you'll communicate before going rogue again. He's not going to trust me. Probably not immediately. But trust is built through repeated actions, not grand gestures. You show up, you communicate, you prove over time that you're reliable. Eventually, people start believing. They found Harris in his office, surrounded by monitors showing security camera feeds and network traffic logs. He looked up as they entered, his expression guarded. Harris, Evan has something to tell you, Miranda said, and I need you to actually listen instead of assuming the worst. For the next 30 minutes, Evan walked Harris through the security improvements, fielding increasingly technical questions with patience and precision. Miranda watched Harris's body language gradually shift from defensive to engaged, then to something approaching respect. Why didn't you just come to me? Harris asked finally. I would have helped implement this. Would you have? Or would you have told me to submit a formal proposal that would take 3 days to review while the attackers found their way in? Harris grimaced. Probably the second one. Protocol exists for a reason. Protocol exists to prevent chaos, but sometimes the threat moves faster than protocol allows. Evan pulled up his laptop. I'm documenting everything I did last night, every system accessed, every change made, every line of code modified. From now on, you'll have full visibility into my work. No more surprises. I appreciate that. And Evan, these security improvements are brilliant, legitimately brilliant. If you'd come to me first, I would have championed them immediately. Then I apologize for not trusting that. I'm used to being dismissed. I've been treating you like a threat instead of a resource. That's on me. Harris extended his hand. Clean slate? Evan shook it. Clean slate. After they left Harris's office, Miranda walked with Evan toward the elevator. The afternoon sun streamed through the building's glass walls, painting everything in warm gold light. Nexus employees bustled past, caught up in their own urgent tasks, barely noticing the CEO and the former janitor moving through their space. Thank you, Evan said, for believing me, for not firing me. Thank you for being patient while I work through my trust issues. I know it's not fair to you.
We're both carrying damage from what other people did to us. That's not weakness. That's just being human. They reached the elevator, but neither pressed the call button. Miranda found herself not quite ready to let the conversation end, to return to the mountain of work waiting in her office. Tyler's science project, she said. How did the volcano turn out? Evan laughed. We followed your advice and did it outside. Good thing, too. The eruption was way more enthusiastic than we expected. Baking soda and vinegar everywhere. Tyler was thrilled. The neighbor's cat was less impressed. Sophie's teacher sent home a note suggesting we practice our experiments with more restraint. I'm pretty sure we're on some kind of list now. The troublemaker parents list. I'm honored to be in such distinguished company. They smiled at each other, and Miranda felt something warm unfurl in her chest. Not attraction exactly, though she'd have to be dead not to notice that Evan was handsome when he wasn't buried under janitor coveralls and exhaustion. But more than that, recognition. The sense of finding someone who understood the specific weight of single parenthood, combined with professional pressure, combined with trying to rebuild from devastation. The elevator arrived with a soft chime. They stepped inside, and Miranda pressed the button for the executive floor while Evan selected R&D. Your daughter's right to be angry at you, Evan said as the elevator started moving. Tyler went through the same thing after his mother died. I was drowning in grief and financial stress, taking every shift I could find, and he was essentially raising himself. He never complained, but I could see it in his eyes, this quiet loneliness, this sense of being abandoned by the one parent he had left. What did you do? Started saying no to extra shifts, started being present even when I was exhausted, started teaching at the community center partly so Tyler could see me as someone who did more than just work minimum wage jobs. Evan's voice softened. He needed to know he mattered more than my fear of ending up homeless. And you know what? Once I started prioritizing him, the financial stress didn't disappear, but it stopped feeling insurmountable, because I had someone worth living for instead of just surviving for. The elevator stopped at R&D. Before the doors opened, Evan turned to Miranda. You're building something important here, but Sophie's only 7 once. You can't get these years back. I know. Do you? Because I lost years with Tyler that I'll never recover. Years when he needed his father and got a ghost instead. Don't make my mistakes, Miranda. Don't wake up 5 years from now and realize you sacrificed the wrong things. The doors opened and Evan stepped out, leaving Miranda alone with his words echoing in the small space. She rode up to the executive floor feeling hollowed out, like someone had reached inside and rearranged her priorities without permission. James looked up as she passed his desk. Ms. Hayes, the board wants an update on the development timeline. They're getting nervous about the delay announcement going public. Schedule a call for tomorrow morning. I'm leaving early today. You have the investor meeting at 4. Reschedule it. I have something more important. She grabbed her bag and left before James could protest further. On the drive to Sophie's school, Miranda made a series of calls that would have seemed insane 2 weeks ago. She canceled the rest of her afternoon meetings. She told James to block off every weekday from 3 to 6 p.m. for the foreseeable future. She called her mother and said she'd be picking Sophie up from school herself, starting today and continuing every day unless a genuine emergency prevented it. What's happening? Her mother asked, concern threading through her voice. Are you okay? I'm trying to be. I'm trying to be the mother Sophie deserves instead of the CEO I think I need to be. Those things don't have to be mutually exclusive, but I've been pretending they do because it's easier to hide behind work than face how much I've been failing at the personal stuff. You haven't been failing, honey. You've been surviving. Maybe, but I'm done just surviving. I want to actually live again. Miranda arrived at Sophie's school 10 minutes before dismissal, joining the cluster of parents waiting outside the kindergarten entrance. Some of them recognized her. She'd made it to exactly 2 PTA meetings in the last year and looked surprised to see her there on a regular Tuesday. Miranda ignored their stares and watched the door, heart pounding with nervous anticipation. When Sophie emerged, chattering with a friend about something that had happened at recess, her eyes went wide seeing Miranda there. For a moment, she just stared, like she was afraid this was a dream that would disappear if she moved too fast. Then she ran, backpack bouncing, and threw herself into Miranda's arms. You came! You really came!
I really did. And I'm going to come every day from now on. I promise. But you always break your promises. Not this time. This time I'm choosing you first. Always. Miranda held her daughter tight, breathing in that distinctive little kid smell of playground dirt and innocence. How would you feel about getting ice cream on the way home? Not because it's a special occasion, just because it's Tuesday and we can. Sophie pulled back, studying her mother's face with the intense scrutiny only children could manage.
Are you dying?
Miranda laughed despite the tears threatening.
No, baby, I'm not dying. I'm just finally starting to live.
They got ice cream, chocolate chip for Sophie, mint chocolate for Miranda, and sat in the shop talking about nothing important. Sophie's teacher was funny. Her friend Emma had brought in a lizard for show and tell. The lunch lady let them have extra tater tots. Mundane details that Miranda had been missing while she built empires and fought battles that suddenly felt less crucial than knowing that her daughter preferred chocolate chips to sprinkles. On the drive home, Sophie fell asleep in her booster seat, face sticky with ice cream residue and perfectly content. Miranda glanced at her in the rearview mirror and felt something shift permanently in her chest. The fear that had driven her for 3 years, fear of failure, fear of betrayal, fear of not being enough, started loosening its grip. Maybe Evan was right. Maybe the things worth fighting for weren't always the things that looked impressive on paper. Maybe success wasn't measured in product launches and board approvals, but in chocolate chip ice cream and being present when your daughter emerged from school. Her phone buzzed with texts from the office. Problems that needed solving, decisions that required her input, crises that would supposedly destroy everything if she didn't respond immediately. Miranda looked at them, looked at her sleeping daughter, and put the phone in her bag unanswered. The work would wait. Sophie wouldn't. That night, after dinner and bath time and 2 bedtime stories that turned into 4 because Sophie kept asking for just one more, Miranda sat in her home office reviewing the development timeline. They were on track to meet the 60-day deadline, barely. Evan's fixes were proving even more effective than projected, actually improving performance beyond the original specifications. The attacks had stopped completely after his security enhancements. Everything was falling into place. Everything except the nagging feeling that something was still wrong, not with the product or the timeline, but with the attacks themselves. They'd been too sophisticated, too perfectly timed, too conveniently stopped right when Evan's status changed at Nexus. Miranda pulled up Harris's initial report about the cyber attacks and started reading through the technical details she'd skimmed before. The routing patterns, the probe methodologies, the specific vulnerabilities they'd been testing. Something about them felt familiar, like a signature she'd seen before but couldn't quite place. Then she saw it. Buried in the technical specifications, a pattern that matched perfectly with the security protocols from Meditech's 2017 breach. The breach that had destroyed Evan's career. The breach that someone had blamed on him despite his warnings about the vulnerabilities. Someone who knew exactly how those vulnerabilities worked because they'd exploited them before. Someone who might be trying to exploit similar weaknesses at Nexus now. Miranda's hands shook as she pulled up everything Harris had collected about the attacks. The timing, the methods, the sudden cessation when Evan joined the executive team. It wasn't about Evan being involved with the attackers. It was about the attackers being afraid of what Evan would discover about their methods. She grabbed her phone and called Harris. I need you to pull every piece of documentation about the Meditech breach from 2017. Every technical report, every investigation finding, every piece of evidence about how the attackers got in. It's almost midnight, Miranda. I know, do it anyway. I think someone's been trying to recreate what they did to Meditech, and I think they stopped attacking us because the one person who could identify their signature just became our senior systems architect.
You think this is about Evan specifically?
I think this is about someone who needs to keep Evan discredited because he's the only one who knows the truth about what really happened. And I think we just stepped into something a lot bigger than corporate espionage. She ended the call and sat in the darkness of her home office, listening to Sophie's soft breathing through the baby monitor. Tomorrow, everything would change again. Tomorrow, she'd have to tell Evan that the attacks weren't random, that someone was targeting Nexus specifically because of his presence there. Tomorrow, they'd have to figure out who at Meditech had really betrayed those patients, who had forged Evan's signature on faulty code, and who was now desperately trying to keep that secret buried. But tonight, Miranda had kept her promise to Sophie. She'd been present. She'd chosen family over fear. And that, she was learning, was its own kind of victory. Harris arrived at Miranda's house at 6 in the morning with 3 laptops, 2 tablets, and enough documentation about the Meditech breach to fill a banker's box. They spread everything across her dining room table while Sophie slept upstairs, the early morning light barely touching the Seattle skyline visible through the windows. "I've been up all night cross-referencing the attack patterns," Harris said, pulling up side-by-side comparisons on his laptop. "You were right. The methodologies are nearly identical to the Meditech breach. Same vulnerability exploitation sequence, same routing protocols, even the same timing intervals between probe attempts. Whoever attacked us learned their techniques from Meditech, or was directly involved in the original breach." Miranda studied the data, her tech background enough to recognize the signatures Harris was highlighting. "Can you trace who at Meditech would have had the knowledge to execute the original attack?" "That's where it gets interesting. The investigation reports blamed Evan, but they never actually proved how the breach happened. They just showed that his digital signature was on the faulty code that created the vulnerabilities. But look at this." Harris pulled up a technical analysis from an independent security firm that had been commissioned after the lawsuit settled. This firm found evidence that the signatures were forged, that someone with high-level access had essentially framed Evan by copying his credentials and using them to approve code he'd explicitly rejected. Who had that level of access? 3 people: the CTO, the head of security, and the VP of engineering. All 3 left Meditech within 6 months of the breach, all with substantial severance packages despite the company collapsing. Harris opened another file. "And here's where your instincts pay off. The current CTO at Apex Solutions, one of our biggest competitors, is Daniel Morrison, former VP of engineering at Meditech." Miranda's blood ran cold. "Morrison. I've met him at industry conferences. He was always asking questions about our development timeline, our encryption methods. He's been at Apex for 3 years. And guess when Apex started developing their own quantum encryption system that's suspiciously similar to ours?" Right after we announced our launch date, Miranda sank into a chair, pieces falling into place. "He's been stealing from us, using the same methods he used to destroy Meditech, except this time he's not just covering up his mistakes, he's actively trying to profit from them. There's more. I tracked the server networks the attacks came from. They're owned by a shell company based in Delaware. That company has exactly one investor listed in the public filings." Harris turned his laptop toward her. "Apex Solutions. They're not even hiding it well. They don't need to. Without Evan, we'd never have recognized the attack signature. We'd never have connected it back to Meditech. Morrison's been operating with impunity for years because Evan was too discredited to be believed, and no one else understood the technical details well enough to see the pattern." Miranda thought about Evan's story, about his wife's death and his son's exposed medical records, about 4 years of working as a janitor because an entire industry believed lies over truth. Her hands clenched into fists. "We need to call Evan, now." "Miranda, it's 6 in the morning. He's already awake. People who've been broken don't sleep well." She grabbed her phone and dialed. Evan answered on the second ring, his voice alert despite the early hour. "Miranda, what's wrong?" "Can you come to my house? Bring Tyler if you need to. Harris and I found something you need to see." 20 minutes later, Evan arrived with Tyler in tow, the boy still in pajamas, clutching a book about dinosaurs and looking bewildered by the early morning summons. Miranda showed them to the living room where Sophie's toys were scattered across the floor. "Tyler, Sophie's upstairs sleeping, but she has a whole bin of dinosaur toys in here. You can play while your dad and I talk, okay?" Tyler nodded shyly and settled on the floor, immediately absorbed in creating what looked like a Jurassic Park scenario with plastic figures. Evan watched his son for a moment, something soft and protective in his expression, then followed Miranda to the dining room. His face changed the moment he saw the documentation spread across the table. All the color drained from his features, leaving him gray and shaken. "That's the Meditech breach analysis," he said quietly. "I haven't seen these reports since the lawsuits. Where did you—" "Sit down," Miranda said gently. "Harris, show him what you found." For the next hour, they walked Evan through the connections, the attack patterns, the forged signatures, Morrison's current position at Apex, the shell company funding the cyber attacks. Evan sat absolutely still, his hands flat on the table, knuckles white with tension. When Harris finished, the silence stretched like a pulled wire about to snap. "He destroyed my life," Evan finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Morrison. He was the one who pushed to launch Meditech's system despite my warnings. When it failed, he forged my signature on the approval documents and fed me to the lawyers like bait. I lost everything, my career, my reputation, my marriage. My wife died thinking I was the kind of man who would compromise patient safety for a paycheck." His voice cracked. "And he's been profiting from it ever since." Miranda reached across the table and took his hand. "We're going to stop him. We're going to prove what he did, and we're going to make sure he can't hurt anyone else." "How?" "I tried to prove it 4 years ago. I had lawyers, investigators, forensic analysts. They found enough to suggest the signatures were forged, but not enough to prove Morrison did it. He covered his tracks too well. 4 years ago, you were fighting alone. This time, you have Nexus's resources behind you. You have a CEO who believes you and a security chief who can trace digital breadcrumbs Morrison thought were buried." Miranda squeezed his hand. "This time, we're fighting together." Harris pulled up another file. "The attacks on our systems? Morrison made a mistake. He got arrogant. The routing protocols he used are sophisticated, but they're not perfect. I can trace them back to specific hardware signatures, and those signatures match equipment that was registered to Meditech during the original breach. Equipment that Morrison would have had access to." "That's still circumstantial," Evan said, but hope was creeping into his voice despite the caution. "Maybe, but it's enough to start pulling threads, and Morrison's at a disadvantage now. He doesn't know we've connected him to the attacks. He thinks Evan's just another employee at Nexus, not someone actively investigating." Harris smiled grimly. "We can use that." "What are you suggesting?" Miranda leaned forward. "We set a trap. We leak information that Nexus has identified a critical vulnerability in our quantum encryption system, something that sounds legitimate but is actually bait. If Morrison takes it, if Apex tries to exploit that fake vulnerability, we'll have proof of corporate espionage that even his lawyers can't explain away. And if he doesn't take the bait, then we go public with what we have. The connection between the attack patterns, his history at Meditech, the forged signatures. We might not be able to prove it in court, but we can prove it in the tech industry. Once people start questioning his methods, his credibility crumbles." Evan stood and walked to the window, staring out at the morning light painting the city gold. "If we do this, Morrison will fight back. He has resources, connections, lawyers who specialize in destroying whistleblowers. He'll come after me again, and this time he'll come after Nexus too. Are you prepared for that? After what I've been through with my ex-husband, after rebuilding a company from rubble while raising a daughter alone, Morrison doesn't scare me." Miranda joined him at the window. "The question is whether you're ready to face him, to finally get the vindication you deserve. I stopped caring about vindication years ago. I just want him to stop hurting people." "Then let's make sure he can't." From the living room, they heard Sophie's voice. She'd woken up and found Tyler playing with her dinosaurs. Within seconds, the two children were deep in collaborative storytelling about a T-Rex who befriended a Triceratops, and they went on adventures together. Their laughter drifted into the dining room, innocent and uncomplicated. Evan smiled, the first genuine smile Miranda had seen from him since he'd arrived. Tyler doesn't make friends easily, too cautious after everything that happened, but Sophie's already got him relaxed. She has her mother's ability to bulldoze past people's defenses. I'm still deciding if that's a good thing. It's a wonderful thing. You're raising someone who sees possibilities instead of obstacles. After watching Morrison win by making people afraid, that kind of optimism feels revolutionary. They spent the next 3 days building the trap with meticulous care. Harris created a fake vulnerability and a dummy version of their encryption protocols, sophisticated enough to look real, but tagged with digital markers that would identify anyone who accessed it. Miranda leaked the information through carefully chosen channels, industry contacts who she knew had connections to Apex Solutions. Evan worked with Priya's team to ensure their actual systems were fortified against any potential attacks that might come during the operation. The board, predictably, lost their minds when Miranda briefed them on the plan. You want to intentionally leak proprietary information as bait for a competitor? Thomas Brightwell's face had gone from red to purple. Have you completely lost your mind? It's fake information. If they take it, we expose them. If they don't, we lose nothing. Except the appearance of having competent security, which will tank our stock price and destroy investor confidence. Victoria Chen shook her head. This is reckless, Miranda. You're gambling the company's reputation on a vendetta against someone who wronged your pet janitor. Evan is our senior systems architect, not my pet anything. And this isn't a vendetta. This is protecting our company from active corporate espionage. Miranda kept her voice level despite the fury building in her chest. Morrison has been stealing from us for months. We either stop him now or we launch a product he'll immediately replicate and undercut. Richard Morrison raised his hand. I support Miranda's plan. If she's right about Morrison, we're already compromised. Better to control the narrative than wait for him to strike first. The vote was close. 3-2 again, the same razor-thin margin that had authorized the launch delay. Miranda was running out of political capital, burning through goodwill faster than she could rebuild it. But she'd made her choice. She'd rather lose her position doing the right thing than keep it by allowing Morrison to continue his predatory tactics. On the fourth day, the trap sprung. Harris burst into Miranda's office at 2 p.m, laptop in hand, face flushed with vindication. He took it. Morrison accessed the fake vulnerability information through a proxy server, and his team has already started implementing it into Apex's encryption protocols. We have timestamps, hardware signatures, digital fingerprints, everything we need. Miranda felt something fierce and bright expand in her chest. Get our lawyers on the phone. I want a cease and desist sent to Apex within the hour, along with every piece of evidence we've collected. And Harris? Call the FBI. Corporate espionage at this level crosses federal lines. Already done. They're sending agents this afternoon to take our statements. Good. Find Evan. He deserves to hear this first. They found Evan in the R&D lab, working through lunch as usual, so absorbed in his code that he didn't notice them approach until Miranda touched his shoulder. When she told him what had happened, he went very still. You're sure? It's actually him? Hardware signatures match equipment from the Meditech breach. The access patterns are identical. We have him, Evan. We finally have him. Evan closed his eyes, and Miranda saw a single tear track down his face before he scrubbed it away. I need to call someone. Give me a minute. He stepped out into the hallway, and through the glass walls, Miranda watched him dial his phone. His side of the conversation was barely audible, but she caught fragments. It's over. Yes, we proved it. I know, Mom. I know. Can you tell her? Tell her I didn't fail her. Tell her I did everything I could. When he came back inside, his eyes were red, but his shoulders were straighter than Miranda had ever seen them. That was my mother-in-law, Tyler's grandmother. She never believed I was responsible for the breach, but she stopped talking to me after her daughter died because the pain was too much. I just told her we proved Morrison was behind it. She wants to see Tyler this weekend, wants to be part of his life again. Evan, that's wonderful. I thought I'd lost my wife's whole family. Thought my son would grow up without his maternal grandparents because they associated me with their daughter's death. His voice broke. You gave me more than my career back, Miranda. You gave me my family back. Miranda hugged him without thinking, feeling him shake with relief and grief and something that might have been hope. When they pulled apart, Harris was discreetly studying his laptop, giving them privacy despite the glass walls. The FBI agents are here, Harris said. Conference room A. The next hours were a blur of statements and evidence review. The agents, a man and woman who introduced themselves as Special Agents Chen and Rodriguez, listened with increasing interest as Harris walked them through the cyber attacks, the connections to Meditech, Morrison's current position at Apex. When Evan described the original breach and the forged signatures, Agent Rodriguez stopped taking notes and leaned forward. Mr. Cole, are you aware that there's an active grand jury investigation into Meditech's collapse? We've been building a case for securities fraud related to the breach, but we've struggled to identify who inside the company was actually responsible. Evan blinked. I had no idea. The case has been sealed because we didn't have enough evidence to indict anyone. But if you're willing to provide testimony, and if this new evidence from the Nexus attacks connects Morrison directly to the original breach, We might finally have what we need. Agent Chen smiled. You could be the witness we've been looking for. I'll testify. Anything you need. I want Morrison to face consequences for what he did. Good. We'll need to coordinate with our cybercrime division and probably bring in the SEC since Apex is publicly traded. This is going to be a big case, Mr. Cole. Are you prepared for that level of scrutiny? Evan looked at Miranda, then at Harris. I'm not alone this time. Yeah, I'm prepared. After the FBI agents left, Miranda called an emergency all-hands meeting. Every Nexus employee crowded into the main conference hall, filling seats and standing along the walls, buzzing with speculation about what could be important enough to halt work in the middle of the afternoon. Miranda stood at the podium feeling Sophie's ice cream promise echoing in her mind. I'm choosing you first, and realized that choosing people over fear extended beyond just her daughter. 3 months ago, I made a decision that many of you questioned, she began. I hired Evan Cole as our senior systems architect despite his controversial history in the tech industry. Some of you whispered that I was making a mistake, that I was letting personal feelings cloud my judgment. I heard the rumors. I understood the concerns. The room was silent except for the hum of the ventilation system. Evan stood in the back, having refused Miranda's offer to join her on stage. He preferred the shadows, old habits dying hard. Today, I need to tell you why that decision was the best one I've ever made as CEO. Evan didn't just help us identify critical flaws in our product that would have destroyed this company. He uncovered an active corporate espionage operation targeting Nexus. He connected that operation to a conspiracy that has destroyed careers and endangered patients. And he did all of this while teaching coding to underprivileged kids at night and raising a 7-year-old son alone. Miranda found Evan in the crowd and held his gaze. The tech industry failed Evan Cole 4 years ago. They believed convenient lies instead of difficult truths. They sacrificed one honest engineer to protect executives who were actually guilty. And in doing so, they lost access to one of the most brilliant minds I've ever encountered. Nexus isn't going to make that mistake. We're going to rebuild our culture around a simple principle. Integrity matters more than convenience. Truth matters more than profit. People matter more than products. She could see skepticism on some faces, belief on others. But what mattered was the slow change in Evan's expression, from guarded to something like recognition, like he was seeing himself reflected in a way he'd forgotten was possible. Our 60-day delay ends next week. We're launching a product that's 30% more efficient than originally planned, with security protocols that set new industry standards. We're doing that because someone cared enough to tell us the truth, even when it wasn't easy, even when it put him at risk. And going forward, that's the kind of company we're going to be. The applause started slowly, then built to something thunderous. Employees stood, and Miranda saw Priya wiping her eyes, Harris nodding with respect, even some of the skeptics looking thoughtful. Evan remained still in the back of the room, but when Miranda caught his eye again, he mouthed 2 words, "Thank you." After the meeting, Miranda returned to her office to find Sophie sitting in her desk chair, spinning in circles while her mother waited in the guest chair. It was 3:30, right when Miranda had promised to pick Sophie up from school every day. "I'm sorry, sweetie. I know I said I'd be there." Sophie stopped spinning. "Grandma said you had something really important happening. She said you were helping someone who needed you." "That's true. But it doesn't make it okay that I broke my promise again." "Were you helping Tyler's dad? The man with the sad eyes?" Miranda blinked. "You've met Evan?" "This morning. Tyler brought his dinosaurs to show me and his dad came in to check on him. He looks sad even when he smiles, like you used to look before you started picking me up from school." The observation was so acute it stole Miranda's breath. "Yes, I was helping Tyler's dad. He's had some very hard things happen to him, and today we fixed one of them." "Good. Tyler's nice. He said his mom died, and now it's just him and his dad. I told him it's just you and me too, so we're kind of the same." Sophie climbed out of the chair and took Miranda's hand. "Can Tyler come to the zoo with us next time? I think he'd like the gorillas." "I think that's a wonderful idea." They went home together, and Miranda kept her promise about being present, even though her phone buzzed constantly with messages about the FBI investigation, media requests about the Apex allegations, investor concerns about negative publicity. She silenced the phone and made spaghetti with Sophie, getting sauce on everything and laughing about it instead of stressing over the mess. They watched a movie about talking animals that was utterly ridiculous and completely perfect. They read 3 bedtime stories, and Sophie fell asleep mid-sentence during the 4th, her small hand warm in Miranda's. After tucking her daughter in, Miranda sat in the darkened hallway and called Evan. "How's Tyler?" she asked when he answered. "Asleep, dreaming about dinosaurs and apparently a girl named Sophie who's going to take him to see gorillas." Evan's voice was soft, weighted with exhaustion and relief. His grandmother called again. "Wants us to come for dinner this weekend. Wants to apologize for the time we lost." "That's good, Evan. That's really good." Morrison's lawyers already reached out. They're threatening to sue me personally for defamation, claiming I've orchestrated an elaborate frame job because I'm bitter about being fired. Let them threaten. We have evidence. The FBI has evidence. His lawyers can bluster all they want. I know. But 4 years ago, his lawyers destroyed me with those same tactics. It's hard not to feel the fear even when I know it's different this time. Miranda understood that viscerally. The way old trauma could hijack present circumstances, making you react to ghosts instead of reality. You're not alone in this. Every time Morrison's lawyers come at you, they'll have to go through Nexus's legal team first. Every time they try to discredit you publicly, we'll counter with facts. You're not some isolated whistleblower they can crush anymore. You have resources, Evan. You have backup. "I have you," he said quietly. "That's what actually makes the difference." The words hung between them, meaning more than professional support, and Miranda felt something shift in her chest. Not attraction exactly, though that was there too. This man with his quiet competence and his fierce integrity and his gentle way with children. But more than that, recognition of someone who'd survived being destroyed and chose to help others instead of becoming bitter. Someone who understood what it meant to rebuild from rubble while keeping your values intact. "Sophie wants Tyler to come to the zoo with us," Miranda said, changing the subject because the emotional intimacy was suddenly overwhelming. "She's decided they're friends because they both have single parents." Evan laughed. Tyler asked if he could have Sophie over for dinosaur adventures. "I think he's found someone who matches his enthusiasm for prehistoric creatures." "Next weekend? After you have dinner with Tyler's grandmother?" "Next weekend sounds perfect." After they hung up, Miranda sat with her phone dark in her hands, thinking about the journey from suspicion to trust, from isolation to connection. 2 months ago, she'd followed Evan because she was certain he was betraying her company. Now she was planning zoo trips and dinosaur playdates and building something that felt suspiciously like the beginning of family. The launch happened exactly 60 days after Miranda had announced the delay, and it was perfect. The quantum encryption system performed 35% better than originally projected, with security protocols that immediately became the new industry standard. Initial orders exceeded projections by 200%. The stock price soared. Investors who'd been skeptical about the delay called to congratulate Miranda on her courage to prioritize quality over speed. More importantly, the product worked. Hospitals implemented the system without a single security breach. Financial institutions praised the efficiency improvements. Government agencies requested custom implementations. Everything Evan had promised came true, and the tech industry started quietly revising its assessment of his competence. The FBI investigation moved faster than anyone expected. Morrison's lawyers tried to suppress evidence, but the connection between the forged signatures at Meditech and the corporate espionage at Nexus was too strong. 6 weeks after the trap sprung, federal prosecutors announced indictments against Morrison and 2 other former Meditech executives for securities fraud, conspiracy to commit corporate espionage, and obstruction of justice. Apex Solutions board forced Morrison to resign within hours of the announcement, their stock price already cratering from the scandal. Evan testified before the grand jury in March, walking into the federal courthouse with Miranda beside him and Tyler waiting safely with his grandmother. The testimony was sealed, but when Evan emerged 3 hours later, he looked lighter somehow, like he'd finally put down a weight he'd been carrying since 2017. "They believed me," he said simply. "Every word. They said my testimony was the key to connecting everything. Because you were telling the truth. Truth has a weight that lies can never match." Morrison's facing 30 years if convicted. Part of me feels like that's not enough for what he did to all those patients, to my family. But mostly, I just feel tired, like I can finally rest. Miranda took his hand without thinking about who might see them, who might photograph them, who might speculate about their relationship. Then rest. You've earned it. The Northside Community Center expanded that spring. Nexus funded a complete renovation, new computers, updated facilities, a dedicated classroom space for advanced coding courses. Amira hired 2 full-time instructors and expanded enrollment to accommodate the waiting list. The program's success attracted attention from other tech companies, and within 6 months, 5 different Seattle corporations had committed to similar partnerships with community centers across the city. Evan continued teaching 3 nights a week, but now he did it as Nexus's Director of Community Outreach and Education, a position Miranda created specifically to formalize his passion project. The role paid significantly more than Senior Systems Architect, but gave him flexibility to be present for Tyler while still contributing technically to Nexus's development projects. "You're building something bigger than a company," Richard Morrison told Miranda during a board meeting in April. "You're changing how the tech industry thinks about corporate responsibility." "I'm just trying to fix the things that are broken. Turns out there's a lot of broken things. And you're healing in the process. That's the part that makes this actually matter." Miranda thought about Sophie, who now had regular play dates with Tyler and talked endlessly about her friend who knew everything about dinosaurs. She thought about Evan, whose sad eyes had gradually brightened until they reflected something closer to peace than grief. She thought about the community center kids who now had pathways to internships and careers they'd never dreamed possible. Healing. Maybe that's what all of this had been. Not just fixing technical flaws or exposing corporate criminals, but healing the wounds that came from being betrayed, abandoned, destroyed by systems that should have protected them. Miranda had healed by learning to trust again. Evan had healed by getting vindicated. The kids at the community center were healing by discovering their potential. Even Tyler was healing, his grandmother back in his life, his father's reputation restored. On a Saturday in May, they all went to the zoo together. Miranda and Sophie, Evan and Tyler, Amira and her 2 daughters, who were also enrolled in the community center programs. The kids raced ahead to see the gorillas, while the adults walked behind at a more reasonable pace, carrying bags of snacks and extra jackets and all the paraphernalia of parenting. "Tyler asked me if you're his girlfriend," Evan said quietly, as they watched the children press their faces against the gorilla habitat glass. Miranda's heart skipped. "What did you tell him?" "That you're my friend. That you're important to me, that I don't know what we are yet, but I'm figuring it out." He glanced at her. "Sophie asked me similar questions about whether her mom was going to get married again." "What did you tell her?" "That her mom is brilliant and brave and deserves whatever makes her happy, and that I hoped we'd get to keep having dinosaur adventures together, regardless of what the grown-ups decide." Miranda watched Sophie point excitedly at a baby gorilla, Tyler nodding along with her observations. "I spent 3 years being afraid to trust anyone, afraid that letting someone close would mean getting destroyed again. But you know what I've learned? Being alone isn't actually safer. It's just lonelier." "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying I don't know what we are either, but I'd like to figure it out together, slowly, carefully, with our kids' happiness as the priority." She took his hand, threading their fingers together. "Is that enough for now?" "That's everything for now." They stood there holding hands while their children compared notes on primate behavior, while Amira's daughters debated whether gorillas or chimpanzees were cooler, while the Seattle sun broke through the perpetual clouds and made the whole world feel possible. 6 months later, Nexus announced a new initiative, a nationwide program partnering with community centers to provide technology education and career pathways for underserved communities. The program was Evan's brainchild, refined by Miranda's business acumen and funded by a foundation she established using a portion of the company's profits. Within a year, they'd expanded to 12 cities. Within 2 years, 30. The tech industry watched and slowly began to follow, corporations competing to show they cared about more than just quarterly earnings. Morrison was convicted in September and sentenced to 26 years in federal prison. The judge's statement at sentencing specifically mentioned the patients whose medical records had been exposed, the lives damaged by his pursuit of profit over safety. Evan attended the sentencing with his former mother-in-law beside him, both of them crying as justice finally arrived. "I wish she could have seen this," Evan said afterward, meaning his late wife. "Wish she could have known I was telling the truth all along." His mother-in-law took his hand. "She knew, Evan. Even in the worst moments, she knew who you really were. The divorce wasn't about believing you were guilty. It was about drowning in pain and not knowing how to swim. I'm sorry we left you alone when you needed us most. You're here now. That's what matters." Tyler's relationship with his grandmother deepened over that year, giving him connection to his mother's family that he'd been missing. He remained quiet and cautious, but the gentleness that had defined him was now accompanied by confidence. He was doing well in school, had made several friends, and talked seriously about maybe being an engineer like his dad when he grew up. Sophie, meanwhile, had decided she wanted to teach people about computers instead of just building them. She'd started helping Evan at the community center on weekends, patiently showing younger kids how to use the mouse and keyboard with the same enthusiasm she brought to everything else. Miranda watched her daughter transform from lonely to confident to purposeful, and knew that the choices she'd made, to trust Evan, to delay the launch, to pick Sophie up from school every day, had changed both their lives immeasurably. As for Miranda and Evan, they moved slowly like they'd promised. Coffee dates that turned into dinner dates, family outings to museums and parks. Long conversations after the kids were asleep about technology and ethics and how to raise children who understood both ambition and compassion. They didn't rush into anything, both of them too aware of how badly things could fall apart when you moved too fast. But by the following spring, when Evan brought Tyler to Miranda's house for Sophie's 8th birthday party, something had shifted. The careful distance they'd maintained had evolved into comfortable intimacy. They knew each other's coffee orders and parenting struggles and professional goals. They'd held each other through Tyler's pneumonia scare and Sophie's first experience with a mean classmate. They'd built something real through accumulated moments of showing up, being honest, choosing trust even when fear screamed otherwise. At the birthday party, surrounded by children high on sugar and the chaos of 8-year-olds playing games in the backyard, Evan found Miranda in the kitchen. "Tyler asked me again if you're my girlfriend. He's getting persistent about defining relationships." Sophie asked if you're going to be her stepdad someday. Apparently she's been discussing this with her friends, and they have opinions. "What do you think?" Miranda looked out the window at their children. Tyler helping Sophie open presents, both of them laughing about something only they understood. "I think we're already family in the ways that matter. Legal definitions can catch up whenever we're ready." "And are we ready?" "I think I am. I think I've been ready since you first showed me that community center, and I realized brilliant people come in unexpected packages. Since you risked everything to tell me the truth about our product. Since you taught me that choosing people over profit isn't weakness, it's the whole point." She turned to face him. "I'm ready if you are." Evan kissed her then, gentle and careful and full of promise. "I'm ready. Let's build something together." They were married in October in a small ceremony at the community center, surrounded by Nexus employees and community center kids and both their families. Sophie was maid of honor. Tyler was best man. Amira officiated, having gotten ordained online specifically for the occasion. The reception featured dinosaur-shaped cookies that Tyler had designed and Sophie had helped decorate, because some things were too important to delegate to professionals. Richard Morrison toasted them with words about redemption and second chances. Priya cried through her speech about watching them build trust when everyone said it was impossible. Harris gave Evan a framed copy of his first Nexus security report with the notation, "Thanks for making my job harder and our company better," scrawled across it. But the moment Miranda remembered most clearly came later, after the ceremony when the kids were playing and the adults were eating cake. Evan's mother-in-law approached them, her eyes wet but smiling. "My daughter would be happy," she said simply. "She'd want Tyler to have this. A family, a mother figure who cares about him. A future that isn't defined by trauma. And she'd want you to be happy too, Evan. To move forward. To build something new without forgetting what you lost." "I haven't forgotten her. I won't ever forget her." "I know. But you're allowed to be happy anyway. That's not betrayal, that's survival." She hugged them both. "Welcome to the family, Miranda. Thank you for seeing who Evan really is when the whole world tried to make him invisible." Later that night,
after the reception ended and the kids were asleep, and Miranda and Evan sat on the deck of her house, their house now, watching the lights of Seattle sparkle below, they talked about what came next. Nexus is stable, Miranda said. The community program is expanding. Morrison's in prison. We could coast now if we wanted, take it easy. But you don't want to coast. Neither do you, Evan smiled. I've been thinking about medical data security, about building systems that prevent what happened to Tyler from ever happening to another family. There's a lot of hospitals that still use outdated protocols. And I've been thinking about expanding the community program internationally, about creating pathways for talented kids in developing countries who have even less access than American kids in low-income neighborhoods. So we're both terrible at coasting. Apparently.
Is that going to be a problem? Only if we forget what we learned about balance, about being present for our kids, about not sacrificing the personal for the professional. Evan took her hand. We're good at building things together. Let's keep doing that, but with boundaries, with priorities that put our family first. Miranda thought about Sophie asleep upstairs, about Tyler in the guest room that would become his permanent room once they combined households completely, about the life they were building that honored both ambition and presence. I can do that. We can do that. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the city lights and thinking about the journey that had brought them here. From suspicion to trust, from isolation to family, from survival to actually living. The road hadn't been easy. There had been moments when Miranda thought she'd lose everything, when Evan thought he'd never escape the shadow of his destroyed reputation, when both of them wanted to give up and retreat back into safe loneliness. But they'd chosen differently. They'd chosen to trust even when it was terrifying, to fight for truth even when lies were more convenient, to build something meaningful even when the easier path was just protecting themselves. And in choosing that harder road, they'd found something neither expected but both desperately needed: redemption, purpose, family. Not the family they'd been born into or the families they'd lost, but the family they'd chosen to create through accumulated acts of showing up and being honest and believing in each other even when the world said not to. That, Miranda thought, was the real victory. Not the successful product launch or the expansion of the community program or even Morrison's conviction. The real victory was sitting on a deck with a man she'd once suspected of betrayal, building a future with children who would grow up knowing that trust was possible, that love could be rebuilt, that broken things could be made beautiful if you cared enough to do the work. I'm glad I followed you that night, Miranda said quietly. Glad I didn't just fire you from the security footage. Glad I chose to investigate instead of assume. I'm glad you saw past the janitor's uniform. Glad you believed me when you had every reason not to. Glad you were brave enough to trust again after your ex-husband broke that trust. We're both pretty brave, I think. Or pretty stubborn. That too. They laughed together and went inside to check on the kids one more time before bed, moving through the house with the comfortable rhythm of people who'd learned to navigate each other's spaces. Tyler was sprawled across his bed with a dinosaur book still clutched in his hand. Sophie had kicked off all her blankets and was somehow sleeping perpendicular to her pillow. They fixed blankets and removed books and stood for a moment in each doorway, watching their children breathe in the peaceful certainty that they were safe, they were loved, they were home. And in that moment, with Evan's hand warm in hers and their children sleeping soundly and the city glittering beyond the windows, Miranda Hayes finally felt like she'd succeeded at the thing that mattered most. Not building a billion-dollar company or changing industry standards or getting revenge on the people who'd tried to destroy them. She'd built a life worth living, with a man who'd survived being broken and chose integrity anyway. With children who would grow up seeing that second chances were real and trust was possible and love could be found in unexpected places. With a purpose that extended beyond profit to actually helping people access opportunities they'd been denied. That was success. That was victory. That was everything. And it had started with a janitor in the wrong hallway, a CEO brave enough to question her assumptions, and the choice to trust even when fear screamed to run. Sometimes the best things in life came from the courage to investigate instead of assume, to build bridges instead of walls, to choose love over fear even when fear felt safer. Miranda and Evan had made that choice, and in doing so, they'd created something neither could have built alone. A family, a purpose, a future that honored both their scars and their hope for something better. The story that began with suspicion ended with belonging. And that, they both agreed, was the best ending they could have possibly found.